Welcome everyone to Dark Winter Nights, True Stories from Alaska. How you all doing tonight? In case you're wondering, the juggling had nothing to do with anything. I just felt like I couldn't walk out to an introduction like that. So this is our first show in 2 years. Boy, we missed you guys a lot. So I hope you missed us too. I was on academic sabbatical last year, so that means the university pays me to go away for a year. And they earned every penny, I think, on that. So had a little spare time in my sabbatical, practiced a little bit of Spanish, hola, and practiced my magic. Spent a lot of time on this, so we'll see if it's worth it. Watch the card. Ready? Oh. Okay. You want me to try one more time? There we go. Okay, and it's back. I'm sorry about that. What's the liability damage we have? Did anyone get insurance? Learned an important lesson from all that time practicing magic, and that is that none of my friends give a crap about magic. And I bought a DeLorean and drove it back up here from Michigan. Did anybody get a chance to have a look at that? We wanted to bring it on stage. As you can imagine, we had a vision of smoke and the car rolls out and the door opens and smoke pours out. We could not do that because unfortunately the stage is hollow. And so they were afraid it would warp the boards and then it'd be like splinters and all the little Nutcracker kids would get splinters next year. Which I thought was a small price to pay, but it is good to be back, I gotta say. I would tell people, we went back to Michigan last year, I would tell people back there, that's where I grew up, and I would say, hey, you wouldn't believe it, I host this really cool storytelling program. And they'd be like, I don't know about that. And I'd be like, seriously, like hundreds of people come to this thing, and they like pay to get in. And then they're like, yeah, now I know you're not telling the truth. But mothers can be like that, so. Thanks for all the notes and cards that you sent while I was gone. That was really touching to me. I can't count how many I received, and that's because you can't count to zero. By the time you start, you're already there. But I felt a little bad about that, but then I realized that I didn't send you any letters either, so we'll call it square, and we can exchange addresses after the show. Our band tonight is Thought Trade. Where did the band go? That's right, they all had to play for a wedding, actually. So instead of the band, I have a plan B. It's all okay, it's all okay. I've been practicing. So I'll be hosting and doing music. Actually, we replaced the band with an iPod, which kind of stinks for them, but at least the iPod doesn't trash the green room, so we appreciate that. I'm not at all bitter with the happy couple that stole my band for the first time in Dark Winter Nights history. Any rumors you've heard that I hope the groom chokes on the wedding cake are completely false. That is a complete fabrication. I wish them the best. Here's how the show works. Anybody first time here at Dark Winter Nights? Could I hear by a round of applause? I can't see anything. Oh, there you are. Okay, wow. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. I think it takes a little bit of courage to come to an event and pay money for it when you have no idea what you're going to get. What we aim for is to be the weirdest show in Fairbanks, and unfortunately that's an extremely high bar. But we do our best. For new people, you may have found already on the back of the program, there are 2 forms. The top one, we would love for you to fill out and hand that into the ushers between stories. And that is, what's your favorite memory? For each show, we want to know what your favorite memory is on a different topic. And this year, the favorite memory is, what's your favorite used to be in Fairbanks memory? And this is inspired by the Sam's Club incident we have, that now everyone's memory of Sam's Club. How many of you were there for the riot that occurred in the shut down college? You all can smell 20% off further away than a wolf can smell a bleeding moose. So the idea is we want memories of things that used to be here, and if you've been here, 5 months, you already have one of those. Executive producer Ryan Peterson's lived here a long time. He remembers the center. Does that ring any bells with people? Okay. From what I hear, it sounds like the Disneyland of the North, so you got any memories of that? Or the Chuck E. Cheese. Anybody remember? All right. And then it became the Chuck E. Chinese because they sold it to a Chinese restaurant, but they didn't bother to pull up the carpet, so it was mouse. It's classy, Fairbanks. That's really classy. So anyway, that may jog some of your memories. So if there's something else that you remember, or you remember a particular experience at any of those places, we'd love to hear about it. So write those down right now, and I'm going to be reading them between Storytellers. You can also submit them at our Facebook page, facebook.com/darkwinternights, and if you don't feel like writing. All right. Underneath that, there's another form that's sort of multi-purpose. First of all, we're going to take one audience storyteller tonight, and we're going to do that after intermission. So if you would like to be up here on stage, fill out that bottom portion and turn it into any of the ushers between stories, or you can turn it in at the information table during intermission, and we will pick a storyteller for the second half here. Now, if you're not familiar with the program, we have some rules, right? First of all, it has to be true, has to take place in Alaska, has to have happened to you, has to be under 15 minutes, and you have to put your own name down, because I don't want to call out somebody's name and have them say no. So please, we're on to you about that. I'm going to say that every show. So hand those in between storytellers or at the information table. If you don't want to tell a story tonight, but you would like to tell a story for us another time, we also have a radio program and podcast, so if you're shy about getting up on stage, no problem. You can tell us a story for that. You can circle another time on that bottom one, but if you don't remember to do that and put it in, you could be up for a fun surprise. The form has other stuff on there about getting contacted about other Dark Winter Nights events through our email, newsletter, and other things, so feel free to fill that out. If you want to help us out, you can usher and get in for free, and you might even get a t-shirt. We're also starting text notifications, so if you'd like to be alerted of any big news with Dark Winter Nights, you can text DWN for Dark Winter Nights to 55678, and I promise we will not bomb your phone with that, because each text to each person costs us 10 cents. And that's a steep amount for me, so I'm going to think long and hard before I send you a text. Also tonight, I don't know if you saw on the screen, but if you'd like to share any of your pictures from tonight, or if you just have a great Alaska picture you want to share up here in the top of the screen, you can text that picture to 55678, and with the text AK Pics, and we will be monitoring that. Yeah, it's a PG-13 here for the stories, not for the pictures that get put on the top of the show. We also, tonight's storytellers all have time limits. If they go over a time limit, a robot bomb disposal unit will roll out onto stage. And why don't you send that out right now? If you've been to an event before, you know that we've never actually used this on anybody, and that's because I'm too non-confrontational to do it, since usually it was me. This time we're going to have an anonymous person off stage running it who's clearly having trouble turning it on right now. Here it comes. So when this thing comes out, that's a sign to you storytellers that it's a good time to wrap it up. You notice it does have a camera, and it can communicate, so... Well, I didn't tell her to do that. Okay, you know the backward button? Okay, anyway. so we can communicate with the storytellers if we need to. Kat, you told me you could operate RC things. While that's working its way off stage, we will have a 15-minute intermission. We have food provided by Hutchison High School students. One is the FFA group there, and the other is the Acadeka group. All the money goes to them, so eat up. Okay, got it? Everybody understand? Any questions? Good. Crystal clear, just like in my classes. All right. Our first story, did it make it? Okay, great. Our first storyteller was our audience storyteller at our last event 2 years ago, where she told a story about nearly getting stomped by a moose. Today, she has a story of a daring at-sea rescue where they're rescuing someone who is really, really bad at getting rescued. Here's Amanda Byrd with a story we call Catch of the Day.
Hi, everybody. So in 2002, I moved to Alaska from Australia. I thought if I came here to do a master's degree in marine biology, it would be an amazing way to see the state and to meet amazing people. And it was. In 2003, this day that this event happened, it was August, and we were heading out to sea to do our research. And I studied zooplankton. Zooplankton is essentially whale food. And when we went out to sea, we would begin our trips with a safety briefing. Now, the safety briefing was to make sure that in the event of whether a mishap, an accident, man overboard, anything that happened, that we knew what to do. So we started out, the ship would start moving out of Seward, and we would go through the ship and know where all of the safety equipment was. So we'd walk around the ship on the decks, we'd go and see the life raft, and so we'd make sure that we knew that if we pulled this handle, the life raft would explode and would land in the water, and we would go jump on the life raft and float off to safety. There was the smoke signal box. Apparently, if you pulled the lid, smoke signals would rise out. I always wanted to lift that lid to see the smoke signals. I didn't have the reason to do that. And then there was the life ring. And the life ring is a horseshoe that sat on a holster on a fence on the upper deck of the boat. And this boat was the research vessel Alpha Helix, the RV Alpha Helix. She was beautiful, majestic. 133 foot long, she was built for the Amazon River. And we're in the Gulf of Alaska. So her big round hull, she was awesome. So we often got a lot of weather in the Gulf of Alaska, and she had this beautiful way of pitching, forward and back, rolling, and yawling. And she could do them all at the same time. She was very talented. We actually affectionately called her the Ralpha Helix. So on this day, we're heading out as usual. It's August. We would head from Seward 130 miles out on what we called the Seward Line, which is a straight line directly out of Resurrection Bay. We would stop every 10 miles and take samples of zooplankton or water and everything and all the sciencey stuff. And this day, as we were heading out, it was daytime, so our captain was on the bridge. Now, this is a 24-hour ship. The captain runs the ship from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and the first mate runs the ship from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. They hated each other. They loathed each other. Whenever they would switch roles, they would say their pleasantries, they would tell the information that they needed to tell each other, and then they would be gone, never to be seen again until their next shift. So by this time, it's around about 6 p.m., we're heading out on the Seward Line, and the first mate has just taken control of the ship. And we're about to sit down for dinner. And we hear for the first time ever, "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday." And this was like startling. I've never heard like a real mayday call. So I ran up to the bridge and I saw the first mate was on the radio with the Coast Guard. And they were trying to determine who was closest to a stricken vessel. And it ended up that we were the Alpha Helix. So we were told to turn around and head back to Seward and to go and rescue this person in a stricken vessel. So we turned around and headed back. So at this point, the first mate had to rouse the captain and tell him what was happening, that there was an emergency, and that the captain needed to come back to the bridge and take control of the boat. The first mate took control of the deck of the boat, and he was going to be in charge of the rescue. So we headed back to Seward, and we were about 20 miles away from the shore, from any shore. This was in the middle of nowhere. And we found a 16-foot personal watercraft, a little fishing boat. It was very heavy in the water, and there was one man in the boat. And this man, he was not wearing a life preserver, but he was wearing a letter jacket. Do you know what a letter jacket is? Like, okay, I'm from Australia. We don't have letter jackets. I thought they were from the movie Grease. So he's wearing a letter jacket. It's, this woolen thing with leather arms and a patch here. I don't know what the letter said. And, he's not wearing a life preserver. And he's a pretty big guy. And also on the boat was a cooler, a red cooler. And out of the cooler was a salmon tail. It was pretty sizable salmon tail. So we reached the guy. It was kind of getting dark a little bit. The boat's heavy in the water. The seas were 22-foot troughs. A 16-foot little vessel, little open vessel with a tiny little cab and one man without a life preserver. So the captain, made contact, and he backed up the boat to our ship to the stricken vessel. And our first mate, he opened the back doors of the Alpha Helix, which brings a nice landing like this stage. And he asked the man, "Sir, please step aboard the Alpha Helix. We'd like to rescue you." And the man says, "No, actually, I would rather not." And the boat's heavy in the water. The seas are going crazy. The Alpha Helix is doing her thing. And he said again, a little more sternly, "Sir, you need to step aboard the Alpha Helix. We're here to rescue you." And he said, "Well, actually, I would rather not." And once again, the first mate really got angry. He got really angry, and he said, "You must step aboard the Alpha Helix right now. We're going to rescue you." And he said, "Actually, I don't want to do that. I want you to tow me to shore because I have the prize-winning silver salmon from the Silver Salmon Derby. And I would like you to tow me into Seward, please." So at this point, the guys already agreed not to be saved. So the first mate gets a rope, and after a few attempts, he throws a rope and hits the boat. It's hard to hit a boat when the boats are rolling, because we're rolling this way, the boat's getting heavier and heavier, and it's rolling too. Anyway, he threw the rope, and the man grabbed it, and he was ordered to tie it to a very secure point on the boat. He selected the cleat on the front of the boat, which, if you know anything about boats, the cleat is where you tie moorings or buoys. You don't tie something that is going to put massive loads on. Anyway, so he tied the rope onto the cleat. First mate's like, "Okay, here we go." And he asked the captain to start putting tension on the line and start pulling this boat. And so the Alpha Helix took off, and the little boat, it came out of the water, that water's draining out of it, and it got way out of the water, and then ping! That rope, just cleat and rope went flying, and that little boat just sank back into the water. And because of the momentum going backwards, it really started sinking faster. And it wasn't long before it actually the stern went down and the man was in the water. So now we actually have a man in the water. So during our training, whenever we left Seward, we were taught if there was a man in the water, science, that's who we are, should point. And always point at the person. So we ran upstairs to where the best view of the man now in the water was, and we pointed. And we're very trainable, science, and we're very good at pointing. Give us one task and we can do it very well. So, but it's actually really hard. If you can ever imagine, it's a little head you're looking at, right? He's not wearing a life preserver, he's wearing a leather jacket, and he's rolling in these 22-foot troughs. And our boat is rolling, so we'd lose him, we'd lose his head, and we'd have to really try and find where he was, but we're still pointing. And so we're waiting for the crew, the people who run the ship and look after us, to go and start the rescue. We look down onto the back deck. The crew, including the first mate, have started arguing. They're arguing on how to rescue this person, and the argument is over 5 minutes long. The guy is still in the water. It's been 5 minutes. So in the Gulf of Alaska in August, the water temperature is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. In 50 degrees Fahrenheit, you have 5 minutes before you lose dexterity of your hands and fingers. By 20 minutes, you lose, your warm blood from your arms and legs gets shunted to your core. By 30 to 40 minutes, that's when you have the possibility of passing out and dying. So we're on a time clock right now. It's now 5 minutes. We're pointing. The crew's fighting. They can't agree on how to do anything. And I look down, and the chief scientist, he comes and starts playing with the joysticks to move the boom, the big crane that we have. We don't use that. The crew uses that. So the chief scientist is moving, and he's like, "Ooh, that makes it go up, out. We can swing it. We can drop the cable. Awesome, I got this guy." So he goes and puts the crane over by the guy, drops a cable, and then realizes, well, what's he going to do? He's gummy. He can't grab a hold of anything. He's got nothing to hook onto. So he aborts that, pulls the cable back in, puts the crane away. So, and the guy can't swim to us because he's heavy in the water and he's losing his body temperature. So now it's been 10 minutes and he's really cold and we're pointing. And so the chief scientist devises a way that they're going to put maybe a different way to rescue this guy. So I run downstairs at this point. I don't really know why. I went down to the bottom deck, and I find one of the crew members is very gently, quietly, methodically pulling on a dry suit. And he's just pulling it on over his clothes, just very serenely. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, this is going to be a recovery. We're not pulling a live person out of the water here. We're pulling a dead person." And so I bolted back up and I'm going to point as well as I can. And at this moment, the guy's been in the water about 12 minutes. And the Byrd biologist, amazing, she says, "Hey, there's a life ring here. Do you think we should throw this?" Yes. We may not be that trainable. We can point. We can do one task very well, but okay, to multitask, yes. So she grabbed hold of the life ring and she threw it into the water, and it landed very close to the man, and the rope that's attached to it went zzz, including the end, all the way into the water. So it's like, okay, he has something to hold on to now, but So the crew's still fighting, the chief scientist still devising a way how to do this, and now that the guy is stable, he's got something to hold on to, the captain moves the ship over towards the man, and the chief scientist grabs a Jacob's ladder. It's a ladder that's made of rope with rungs on it, and he throws that over the side, and in the hopes that once we get close to the man, he can climb up, except his hands are gummy. But what it did provide was a really good leverage point for he and another man to use the alpha helix rolling, and she was really rolling. And when the alpha helix rolled down, the chief scientist and another scientist grabbed one arm of this man each and pulled him up over onto the side. And he landed in a puddle of wetness. And the chief scientist and this other scientist were screaming when they pulled this man over. And we're like, what? Why are you screaming? And as it happens, we didn't know that this man was 380 pounds and 6'7", and now he's soaking wet. So one of the scientists had broken ribs, but the guy's safe, he's on board, he's severely hypothermic. He was in that water for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. So we ripped off the leather jacket unceremoniously, took him up to the library, and that's where we could actually help. And the cook, who is also the nurse, she was totally in control. She said, all right, I want science. I want you to strip all of your beds from the blankets from your beds, put them into the dryer, and I want you to just cycle them through, and we're going to put him into a hypothermia bag, and we're going to put the blankets on top. So off we go. We can do this. And so half the crew goes and half the science goes and strips the blankets, and the other half, we strip the man down to his tighty-whities. We didn't actually want to look under his tighty-whities, and we felt that the man had lost so much dignity already that leaving his tighty-whities on would be at least a little bit of dignity left. I don't think it's best for hypothermia, but at this point, that's what we were doing. And so we had to put him into a hypothermia bag, which is essentially a mummy bag that's made of nylon that is filled with fleece. And so you put it over somebody, you zip it up over their head, and it has a hole for their face. Except this guy is 6'7". And so the bag comes up, the top of it's about here, and the hole for his face is down here. And so whatever. So he's in the mummy bag, he looks ridiculous, and he's shivering, but we started getting the blankets, and we put the blankets on top of him. And we started asking him questions to keep him lucid. So we asked him his name, and we asked him where he was from, and he was from Anchorage, and he ran a car wash. So, and we asked him if he was married, and he started to get a little shifty. And we're like, oh, and he said, yeah, I left my wedding ring and my gun on the boat, and my wife will be really angry. So, and we also asked him if he'd had any other boats before. And he said yes, and he started to tell us a little bit about the boats. And he was really excited that he had purchased this new boat, and he just purchased it. And he spent all of his money on it, and he forgot to save money aside for insurance. So now the boat is sinking to the bottom of the Gulf of Alaska. And he started to tell us about his prize-winning fish and how he was really sad that he missed that prize-winning fish. But we'd asked him what had happened to the last two boats that he had. And he said, they sank. But he was going to come out this weekend with his buddies, and they were going to pull up his boat and get his gun and his wedding ring and go out and catch another salmon. So the things that I learned about this trip, if you're going to make any sizable purchase, put some money aside for some good insurance, because you never know what's going to happen. The other thing I learned is those who are in control don't always take control. Thank you very much.
Amanda Byrd, ladies and gentlemen. She got engaged last week. Mike, are you out there? Congratulations, you guys. If my wife is listening, if you could call State Farm, I forgot to put insurance on the DeLorean when I got it out, so. Just kidding. Okay. I teach a 100-level media literacy class at UAF, so that means I know a little bit about a lot of different communication theories, enough to be dangerous. One of them is called the inhibitory effect, And that's if you see someone punished for something, you're much less likely to do it yourself. Unless you're a politician, then you're somehow completely immune. Our next storyteller, unfortunately, was the one punished in this scenario, but he triggered a very profitable inhibitory effect. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a secret code in the program for the storytellers I particularly like the most. I misspelled their name, so take an R out of the back of that. And I'd like to welcome Atileo Frazerra with a story we call Winged It.
So, this story that I'm about to tell you, I feel, has a couple of great hallmarks for life in Alaska. And I think the same hallmarks apply to a lot of great stories that are told in and about Alaska. And those are operating equipment, in this case, a chainsaw, doing a favor for your family or friends on their property, and not wearing exactly 100% of the recommended safety gear. So in 2005, I am 19. The previous couple of years, we've had some really bad fires here in the interior, and there are grants floating around for clearing defensible land around your home so that in the event that there is a wildfire, it doesn't bring your house down. So I'm going out, and I'm going to help my folks clear a bunch of land around their house, and my really good friend Pauline has decided to come with me. I'm renting a room from her, and I may have leveraged that a little bit. So we're going out, and I grew up on a piece of land that is out at the end of state road maintenance. So that's not necessarily a long way by Alaska standards, but it's definitely not particularly close to anything else. So we go out, and I've got my chainsaw ready. It's a nice big steel 360. It's the entry-level professional saw. Like, if you're gonna go cut some stuff down, this is where you start, especially if you're gonna do a lot. So I've got my saw, I've got my nice helmet with the ear cups, and it's got this like great little face mask thing that has like nice mesh, so I'm not gonna sweat in it. And I just go to. At this point in time, I've spent pretty much every summer of all of high school working for the local saw shop that sells chainsaws, so I'm pretty comfortable with one. I've done some fire science training stuff. I'm getting ready to get my red card. And so I go out there, and I'm starting to fall stuff, and Pauline's being a real champ. She's following behind me, she's brushing out, she's like picking up spruce, she's doing all this stuff. I take out a whole bunch of black spruce. And I'm doing some, like, a lot of little stuff in big clumps. And then we've got this one tree, and it's probably the largest tree on our property. It's this big, fat spruce tree. It's about 40 feet tall, and it's got like this like forked twin top, and it's on kind of a weird hill. And so I'm just standing there looking at this thing like, I got to figure out how to do this. So I do a little planning. I get my front cut in, I get my back cut in, and it just perfectly drops. And I am pumped. I have done it. I'm ready to do more. I'm going to find everything. I'm going to cut down all of the tall trees. This is what I am doing now. And so I am just like pumped, and I am going, and so I see my next target. It's this nice, kind of like decent-sized birch tree. It's, within 100 feet of the house, so it's got to go. So I'm walking over, and, I take like one step, two steps, and I'm just like really like already figuring it out. I'm calculating my angles, I'm looking at my cuts, and just as I take a step over a log that I previously felled, something grabs the end of the chainsaw bar, rotates it in my hand, and just as I bring my left leg up, I kick the bar, and my hand hits the trigger on the saw. That's it. That's all it took. So at this exact moment, I just stop. I freeze. And then part of my brain turns on, and I hit the handbrake for the chain stop. And I know that there is no question I have definitely just ruined these pants. Nothing hurts, and I haven't fallen over, so these are both good. But I know I've got to look. Like, I know the pants are done, but I got to look. So I turn off the saw, and I kind of hold it out of the way and pick my leg up, and yep, pants are done. Like, I've managed to, like, not only did they, like, split kind of in the axis that the chain hit it, but it also just sent a rip straight down the front of my leg. So now I've got kind of like a half short. Yeah, the pants are done. And so I just lift my leg a little bit higher, and I see before me a 3-inch long, literally half-inch wide, just piece of my knee is gone. And so that's the thing about how a chainsaw works. So if you have a knife, you cut between 2 layers, and you have 2 things that are now separate, but you can, if you have a very sharp knife, you just flop them back together and you can't tell. The way that a chainsaw works is it grabs some material and it throws it away. So I look down, and there's just this piece that is gone. It's not bleeding, it doesn't hurt. I actually can't feel anything at this point in time, which I'm very thankful for. And so I just, at this point in time, turn the saw off, set it down. I'm kind of trying to keep the legs straight. Pauline is standing about 20 feet behind me because she's been brushing, and she sees this happen, and so she like kind of comes up and she's like, huh? And then she looks down at my knee, and I get to watch her blanch. I'm like, okay, we should go inside. Like, we should just take care of this. And so she's just kind of like, she's already kind of rattled, right? Like, she doesn't know exactly what we're going to do with this. So I kind of peg-leg my way back into the house. And it's, you know, like, of course, we're like kind of out on one end of an acre of property, and the house is on the other end. And so we get in, and my mom is, you know, doing house stuff. It's the weekend, and she looks over and she says, "Oh, well, that was really quick," because we had just been in for a couple minutes to like have like lemonade and cookies and hang out. And she turns around and just kind of blanches and gets a little pale, because at some point in the walk from my incident site to the house, I have started to bleed. And so the front of my leg is just covered in blood. And so, you know, if there are 3 people who are probably actually fairly well equipped to deal with this situation, it was the 3 of us. Pauline and I had just finished our EMT basic certification program. We're both nationally certified emergency medical technicians. My mom had helped start some of the EMS services here. And so, you know, like, we get some gauze, we get some towels, I put pressure on it. And so I'm just sitting here, and I kind of get to watch, as I'm thinking about the fact that I'm either in shock or going into shock, I get to watch Pauline and my mom start to freak out. Oh my God, what should we do? Do we need to take him to the hospital? Do you need to go to the hospital? Maybe we can just take him to urgent care. What needs to happen now? Where do we go? So because I have finished the EMT program and I have had just the right amount of head trauma, I'm just in there rooting around, right? I'm like, no, there are no bone chips. I don't see anything. That might be my kneecap, but it's not missing anything. And there's no muscle damage. So I think I probably just need stitches. And the 2 of them are like, okay, stitches. So like maybe urgent care? What? And I just kind of like retreat into the back of my brain for a moment. I'm like, I have a date with my girlfriend tonight. And I'm supposed to give her a ride. And I definitely cannot do that now. So I'm like, okay, give me the phone. They're like, what? Give me the phone. Why do you want the phone? Because I need to make a phone call. So first I call urgent care. I'm like, hey, you guys do stitches, right? I've got one for you. They're like, yeah, we do stitches. How late are you open? We're open. Okay. Second phone call. Call my girlfriend. Hey, hon, how's it going? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know how we were going to go do the thing tonight, and I was going to give you a ride? Could you find another ride? Well, I kind of winged myself with a chainsaw. You what yourself with a what? Winged myself with a chainsaw? Still have a leg. It's good. Just probably need stitches. This is, to the day, one of her favorite stories, and it's excellent to hear her side of it. So we get me loaded up into a vehicle, and we get me to urgent care. And, you know, I've got, you know, this big wad of stuff kind of like ace bandaged to my knee, and I'm kind of peg-legging along. I'm like leaning on Pauline. And the check-in nurse is like, hi, you know, like, you look like you could use some help. And I'm like, well, I clipped myself with a chainsaw. I'm gonna go get the doctors. Cool. So she comes back in a minute, and there are these 2 doctors, and they look weirdly giddy. Like, this is the Tanana Valley Clinic urgent care, and this is like literally the same summer that it opened. So these guys are like, chainsaw injury? Oh, yeah, sir. Please come back. Let's take you back to the examination room and we can kind of unpack this and figure out what we want to do. And so we get back into the room, and the guy's looking at it, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, there's a chunk missing." So the two doctors are like, "Okay, we're going to talk strategy for a second." So they're over there, kind of on the side of the room, being like, "Oh man, it's..." Okay, so we're going to try to just stitch it closed. Like, we don't want to try staples. We're actually going to do needle and thread. It's going to be hard because you don't have the two flap thing from you. Gone. Okay. So they put 14 stitches across this fairly large chasm in my knee that has like a little extra defect thing in it because chainsaws aren't really a precision fine tool. So I've got 14 stitches in my knee, and the guy like wraps up because like the one guy is kind of like looking very studious, and the other guy is very carefully like working the little fish hook, and they finish, and like, they tie it off, and they have this very excellent, like, "Well done, doctor. Thank you, doctor. Well done" moment. So one of the doctors turns to me and says, "Okay, here's the deal, Slim. Do not bend that leg for the next couple of weeks because you will pull those stitches out because they're under a lot of stress already." So, like I said, my summer job was to work for the local chainsaw shop. And there's not a lot you can really do. Just kind of like post it out like in a chair, like, "Hey, how's it going?" Thankfully, I could still perform my major task, which was sharpening chainsaw chain, which I am thankfully very good at. Otherwise, I suspect that would have hurt a whole lot more. But it also meant that I could just kind of stand up behind the counter a little bit more, kind of get into the sales side thing. So I, got to do sales, which was kind of neat. Somebody'd come in like, either like a seasoned guy that we had seen in and out of the shop for the last couple of years, and, somebody brand new, like looking to get in, like clear some land, do a favor for their family, do the whole thing. I'm like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, you're looking for a saw. Okay, well, are you gonna be felling big stuff? Are you gonna be felling little stuff? Is the saw for you? Is it for a friend? Like, how big do you want? Like, how much horsepower? Safety gear? Yeah, no, I really like the bucket helmet with the face shield thing. There's just this like one little problem that if there's a teeny tiny little like sapling right there, you're not going to see it, and that can be problematic. How about chaps? Don't use them? Let me show you something. I sold more chaps in the next 3 months. More chaps in the next 3 months than we had sold in 3 or 4 years. We ran out. We ordered more. I was going through them like mad. Like, "Oh yeah, buy a sack of chap. Buy 2 pair. Maybe you catch one. Maybe you just don't." So there are a couple of happy epilogues to this story. The girlfriend who asked I what myself with my what decided that despite that story, which she has never let me down, she would marry me. So good job. And now here's kind of the fun, gross epilogue. So the next summer, I have unfinished business. There's still like another 4 acres of land that needs to be cleared. Thankfully, all of the big trees are down. So I'm out there with the Sandvik, and I'm just kind of like hacking down like little brush and taking out little saplings and, just like whacking stuff. And I kind of get over to where I'm at, and I'm just reminiscing briefly. And I look over and I see this like one like medium-sized tree that must have missed like the first culling, and it's got something on it. It's like a caterpillar, or maybe a slug. Do we even have slugs in interior Alaska? So I'm just fascinated, right? I'm like, man, what is this weird little critter? Yep. Nope. It's coming back to me. Grabs material, throws it away. That is a tiny piece of Atileo leather. So the important story here is, always wear your chaps. Yes. All right. Thank you.
Atileo Frazerra. All right, got some of your memories. March 1998 at India Rose Restaurant, where the Steese Highway gas station is, I suffered/survived a heart attack and haven't had Indian food since. Sounds wise. Going to get bad Chinese food with college buddies in the building that was formerly a Chuck E. Cheese and still sported the original carpet. Asawan, is that what it was called? And it was bad? I'm sorry, say that one more time. So good. And then gotta be Dairy Queen. When I first moved here, people would give me directions that included, then you turn where the Dairy Queen used to be. I just picked these at random. I hope you all know that we don't select. Then I heard the story of how it exploded. I didn't know, so the Dairy Queen exploded too? A lot of stuff explodes up here. That makes me a little nervous. There's still that gas station that I pass in the park, so I'm like, not stopping there. All right, our next story. I first heard in my buddy Rod Ebersol's garage, and it really exemplifies the mission of Dark Winter Nights, which is to take great stories from the garage to the stage, and then we send them out into the world via our radio program and podcast. And that's mainly because you all can't fit in Rod's garage. It's big, but he's got a lot of stuff in there. David Best has been cheating death since before he was even born. And so he's up next with a story we call the Anderson Legend.
That's probably the only time he has to raise the mic. It was the summer of 2013, one of the hottest summers in Alaska for quite some time. I had bought some land in Anderson back in 2005, sight unseen. So I decided one day I was going to go and visit this land, put my feet on it, make sure I owned it, make sure there were any squatters or anything on the land. So the day started out normal, drove down to Anderson. Anderson subdivision is past Anderson, about 75 miles on the Parks Highway. You cross over the Cog Hill Bridge, and then you make a right on Colby Road. So as I made the right on Colby Road, I saw an elderly couple at the mailbox collecting their mail. So I stopped and asked for directions, and I showed them the map and showed them that I owned the land and everything, just to be on the safe side. And they gave me directions. So, feeling very proud of myself, knowing where I was going, I drove off down this dirt road. I made a right, a left, another right, and then I came to the road where it supposedly ran parallel to where my property was at. As I'm driving down the road, I'm all happy, yes, I'm finally going to see my land. And then all of a sudden, the road stopped. The road was on the map, but where the road stopped was totally different than what the map indicated. So I got out the truck and I'm looking at the map and I'm trying to figure out where I was at and everything. And at that time, a guy who lived at the end of that road, he came out and he started talking to me and everything. And he showed me one of the land markers. And we calculated that my land was about 3/4 of a mile away from that land marker. There was supposed to be land markers every half a mile. So feeling confident about where I'm going and figuring all I have to do is walk in a straight line. How hard can that be? And the little guy on my shoulder is like, I don't know. But I'm like, be quiet. So now I'm back to the truck. I let my Heinz 57 out. A Heinz 57 is a mutt. That's what they call mutts in Louisiana. He's brindle because he has Staffordshire Terrier. He has the head of a lab, and he sheds like the chow he is. And he has like an Australian herding dog and some other terriers in him, which totally confuses him. He doesn't know if to hunt voles or if to just run and play. So anyway, we let him out, pulled out the bug spray, sprayed myself down, got my weapon, got some water, got my maps. How hard can this be? Boy, was I around. So I set off from the marker in a straight line, and I was in the Army, so I had a pace count, so I'm using my pace count. And then about 100 meters along this clearing, I came to this marsh, and then it dawned on me, that's why the road stopped. And at that time, the guy on my shoulder was going, turn back. I'm like, nah, nobody likes a quitter. So I pushed on through the marsh, and then I came to this wall of black spruce and that's on the brush. And then again, it was like, time to turn back. This is your last chance. I felt confident. I had my weapon, I had water, and I had my trusty sidekick, Calla. So I pushed into the black spruce, and I'm walking, keeping my pace count. But as I'm looking at the ground, all I can see is bear prints and bear scat. Not deterred, I'm going to find this marker. This is going to be the day that I find this property. I've owned this property for 8 years, and I've never seen it. So I pushed on, and then about an hour into my journey, I figured I should be at the marker. So I started looking around, and there's no sign of this marker. So I figured maybe my pace count was off because of the dents on the brush and everything. So I pushed forward about another 100, 150 meters. And there was nothing. So now I'm getting scared. So I'm starting sweating profusely. And I'm drinking water like crazy. And I'm searching for this marker. Then at that point, I was like, David, it's time to turn around. It's time to go back. So in my mind, I had walked a straight line. So all I had to do was do an about face and go back the way I came. Boy, was I wrong. I was totally lost and didn't know where to go. So I came to an eye day, and everybody knows it's eye day. I pulled out my weapon and started firing rounds in the air and yelling and waiting to see if anybody replied or if anybody fired a shot. Pats! Yelled, waited. Now I'm like 10 rounds in, and I'm like not hearing anybody. This time I'm just dripping in sweat, drinking water, and by this time, the mosquito repellent had worn off. And the Alaskan birds started to attack me in swarms, and I mean, they're all over my face and everything, and I was totally lost. With all the bear scat and bear sign on the ground, I decided to save one round for myself. That's what we did in Iraq. We always said if we got into a firefight and we ran out of ammo, we were going to save one round for ourselves. We were never going to be taken alive. So I was like, I'm not going to be eaten alive by a bear. So I saved this one round for myself. So at that time, I'm out of water, and all I can hear is the beating of my heart and the panting of my dog, and the squishiness of the sweat in my boots. Now my boots are saturated. Finally got to the point where I started to feel weak, so I took my boots off and just chucked them. Took my socks off and just chucked them. So I'm still walking, and by this time now it's like 3 hours into this ordeal, and I don't have a clue where I'm at. So finally, I came to this clearing, and I'm standing there, and I'm trying to figure out where to go, and by this time my pants were just soaking wet, and I took my pants off. And chucked them. So now I'm out there in just an Under Armour shirt and some spandex shorts. barefooted with a weapon in my hand. Mosquitoes all over me, all cut and scratched up. But at least I still had one round in my weapon. As fate would have it, as I left the clearing, my hand with the weapon in it bumped a tree, and the round went off. And I remember looking up to the sky and saying, "You're a funny guy." So I pushed on past the clearing, and at this time now it's 3.5, almost 4 hours. And I'm pushing through the brush. And it was about an hour. It seemed like I had gone like 1.5 miles, and I came to this clearing. And there across the clearing, I saw it. It was my pants. I had made one big, gigantic circle. Only if I can walk a straight line the way I make circles, I would have been golden. So dejected, got my pants, put them on. Found the closest tree and just sat down. And I'm starting to make peace with myself that I'm not going to make it out of here. So a lot of things started crossing my mind. I had cheated death so many times. Once, when my mom was 6 months pregnant with me, a rumor started that I wasn't my father's child, and he was an abusive alcoholic. So he punched her in her stomach. And when I was born, I had a blood clot in my back from where he had punched her so hard. It had transferred to me. And then there was another time when I was in Iraq, and I encountered a 7 Series BMW packed with 1,000 pounds of explosives. And I had to have plastic surgery on my face. Even this sling today is related to one of the injuries I have. And I only have 9 fingers. But the good thing about having 9 fingers, you get 10% off manicures. So as I'm sitting there, my dog next to me, I'm envisioning 3-4 years from now, somebody's going to be out walking in the woods and come across my skeleton with my dog just laying right next to me. And it's at that point, a calm came over me. I had made peace with myself. If this is the way I was going to go, this is the way I was going to go. And as I was sitting there, I'm looking down, and there's these red, orange, yellowish berries. And I'm like, I'm going to die anyway, so why not take the chance? So now I'm popping these berries like Skittles. They have a bitter taste, and they're leaving a chalky taste in your mouth, but I wasn't eating them for the taste. I was just trying to get some fluids into me. And while I'm there, I'm talking to my grandmothers, my grandfathers, and I'm telling my kids, hey, I love you. See you on the other side. Thinking about all the guys I've lost and, saying until Valhalla. That's our saying, basically. And then it dawned on me, the constant thing that was still there was the sun. And I was like, I can follow the sun. Because it was high in the sky, because I was walking from tree to tree and, trying to navigate out. And with renewed vigor now, I'm ready to go, eating all these berries. And I set out on my way. About an hour into the journey, now we're about 7 hours into the journey, into this whole ordeal, I look back, and Callum, my dog, is just laying there. And I was like, come on, Calla, let's go. We can't stay here. And he just looked at me, and he would not move. And it was at that point I had three choices. Either stay there with him and endure whatever was to come, carry him, which I couldn't, or leave him. Being a soldier, you never leave anybody behind. But I had to make that decision to leave my dog. And I did. With mosquitoes all over me, scratches, scrapes, dehydrated, smelling like the outdoors, and a heavy heart, I pushed on. I had gone about a mile and a half, 2 miles, when I saw this cabin off in the distance. I didn't get too excited because I'd seen 3 or 4 cabins before and 4 or 5 road systems, but it was all in my imagination. So to me, this probably was another mirage. But as I got closer, I realized it was an actual cabin. And I walked up to the cabin and tried the door. And the door was unlocked. And I crawled inside to get away from the mosquitoes. As I'm there laying on the cabin floor, I look over and I can see a bag of charcoal. Now I'm thinking back, I don't know if those berries were poisonous or not, but I read somewhere charcoal kind of neutralizes poison. So I went in the bag and took out one of the briquettes and started chewing down. Yummy, not. But as I'm laying there, I'm thinking, I had just left my dog, and I was heartbroken, in a daze, crying. I just laid there. And then as some time passed, I was like, I can't stay here, I gotta get up and move. So I exited the cabin and I'm standing there and I'm thinking about Calla. Did something happen? Did the bears get him? Did he pass? Whatever. And then at that point, a big gust of wind came out of nowhere and just blew across the clearing. And then there was some rustling in the bush. And my first thought was bear. So here I am standing, barefooted, empty weapon. And I started to retreat to the cabin. And then, in a flash of moment, out came bounding like a bunny rabbit, this brindle-collared lab, straight to the clearing. I was about 2 miles away from him. I don't know how he found me. Maybe it was my smell. I don't know, but he came directly to exactly the same spot I was at. So, all happy and excited, we proceeded to travel down the road, and we came to this cabin. And there was a car outside, a vehicle outside, so I went up and knocked. This guy came out, and I'm standing there with a dog, barefooted, an armor t-shirt, and just some army pants, looking like all hell, mosquitoes circling all around me, all scratched up and everything. And I was like, could I have some water, please? He disappeared in the cabin, and he came back with a pitcher of water and some glass. That was the best water ever. Me and Calla drank to our heart's content. And then while I was drinking, he looked at me, and he was like, you're a lucky fellow. He was like, if my wife was home by herself, she would have shot you on sight. Thanking him for the water, I got directions and headed on down the road. I eventually came to another cabin, which was the cabin of the elderly couple I had met earlier at the mailboxes. So they invited me in, we got some more water, and he gave me a ride back to my truck. in his 4x4. Getting back to my truck, there was a neighbor. The neighbor was there. He had enlisted the help of another neighbor, and they were out searching the woods for me. Too embarrassed to even say anything. I was like, I'm fine. They're looking at me, and I'm I'm good. I'm back. I made it to the truck. So thanked them for their help, got in the truck, and headed back to Fairbanks. On the way back, I stopped in Nenana, bought a whole boatload of snacks, and just feasted on the way back. I never went back down to that property. But some years later, last year, I decided to go and try my hand again. This time I was better prepared. And as I'm following this road, I'm coming to another dead end. But on this big spruce tree, it said no trespassing. So as I pulled in to turn around, this old guy, he came out and he's like, come. And he waved me. And as I pulled onto the property, I could tell it was him and a couple of other neighbors. They were just sitting down, shooting the breeze, having some beers. And I told him I was down here looking for some property. And then out of the blue, he was like, you're the legend. You're right up there with Bigfoot and Sasquatch. There's this story about this big 6'6" black guy that came down here looking for some property. I never found it, but he disappeared. And people that never actually saw him thought the other neighbors were, blowing smoke, so to speak. I looked at him and said, yes, I'm real. He was like, have a beer. So I drank the beer and we talked, and his property was only about half a mile away from mine. He said I could use it as a base and everything in order to get to my property and everything. Later that year, though, I found out that one of the neighbors had gone around and pulled up some of the property markers because he didn't want too many people in that vicinity. I would like to think that my property marker was one of the property markers pulled up. Maybe, maybe not. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
David Best. Whew. All right, some of your memories. The Center, with whirly ball roller skating, bowling, theater, and disco. Now, okay, I was not here for the Center, but I'm starting to feel like this is a thing that old Fairbanksans do to new Fairbanksans, which is talk about all the things that were in the Center that may or not actually have been in the Center. Because I've heard, like, arcade. There was, there was. What else was in this? And now it's a Sears? I would go in there, and I'm like, where did you put where was the disco? I mean, by where the lawnmowers are? Upstairs, where you can get your glamour shots taken now. That's moving up. The Masonic Temple. That one still hurts a little bit. That still hurts. The ice climbing wall on the Steese on the way to Fox by the golf ball. Yeah, if it's any consolation, that went away every summer, so it's a lot of disappointment for you. It's gone again. Why do they keep doing that? Our next story was emailed to us by the storyteller's wife, Connie. I got a vague sense that this wasn't his idea, but some couples share emails, so I thought, whatever, we'll bring him in. I love the story, and I love the way that he tells it. I did confirm it wasn't his idea to come on Dark Winter Nights, but Connie and I are making him do it tonight. He's another recipient of the Rob Can't Spell Award. Ron Boynton, there's an N in there. Here he is with Conversing with a Polar Bear.
Well, good evening. I have to tell you something right away. If I'm pulling my pants up, it's because I lost the button, and I don't want to have a story for next time. So my story starts back in the early 80s, almost 40 years ago, when my wife and I decided to move up to Barrow, Alaska to work with the Presbyterian Church. Now, you'll have to excuse me if I call it Barrow. I know the new name is Utqiagvik, but after 23 years, I just can't get over calling it Barrow. By the way, Utqiagvik means home of the snowy owl. So I remember the day we flew into Barrow, and we had some people picking us up there, and it wasn't what I expected at all. It was pretty white, and they took us to our new home. And by Barrow standards, it was a pretty nice home. We walked in, and there was only a couple bullet holes in the roof, and there was only a couple areas where there was a real draft coming in. But I remember it was either my daughter or my son saying, "Dad, come here, come here." And the four of us, my son and my daughter and my wife and I, we went to the bathroom and peered around there, and there was something wrong there. Where there should have been a toilet was a 5-gallon bucket with a toilet seat on it. And we were, what is this? So anyway, we got used to it, and we spent 12 years with that thing. Anyway, we settled into Barrow, and my children started school, and my wife got settled in, and she could always tell our kids at school because they were the only ones with brown hair, so she could pick them out right away. And so I started getting ready in my job and figuring out how I was going to start a youth program with the kids of Barrow. And so I was trying to figure out what Eskimo kids would like to do that would get them to come to church. And it was really a lot easier than I thought it should be. There was very few vehicles in the city of Barrow at that time. And most of the way they got around was either a snowmobile or a three-wheeler. And so when I would get in that, church had a big white van, and when I would get into that and I would drive down the streets, the kids would actually wave me down. And they would say, "Hey, can I get a ride?" And I was going, "Yeah." And so it was easy to get them into church and start the meeting with them. So anyway, it was, we'd spend a few months there, and it was in January, and it was pretty dark and pretty cold. And one snowplow, I think, in Barrow was out during that day because it was kind of windy. And he went down the road towards the point. Now, the point is about 14 miles past Barrow, but the road only goes 7 miles. And at this particular day, this driver, I think he decided to just go all the way, so he made a road all the way to the point, and 14 miles out. So that evening, we were sitting at home and watching TV and whatnot. And I don't know if you remember RatNet, but that's what we got to watch. It was one channel, and it was tape delayed. And so when if you were in Christmas, you would get Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade on it, you know. So anyway, we were there, and I had heard that they put this road all the way out there. So I told my wife, "You know what? I've never been to the point. I think that I'll take my son, and we'll get some kids, and we'll go all the way out to this point." And so we got ready, and I got the van, and on a whim, I thought, I'm going to take this rifle. I had a 30-30. The stock was all busted up, and the barrel was rusted, and I had one bullet. And so I thought, that's all I need. So, I put the bullet in my pocket, and I stuck the gun by the seat, and we proceeded to go. And it wasn't long when we had 18 or 19 kids in this vehicle. And we would drive down the road, and we would tell stories, and we would laugh and sing, and we just have fun. And so I told my wife, if I'm not back by 11, Send somebody out for us. We're probably stuck or whatever. And so we went out and we started driving, and we got to the end of the dirt road, and we got onto the snow road there that he had plowed. And we had gone about 4 or 5 miles down this road, and there, about 20 yards off, I noticed a seal. And it wasn't any ordinary seal, it was ugaruk, or it was a bearded seal. And these seals weigh anywhere between 400 and 500 pounds. And by this seal was a white fox, and he was eating. And so I stopped the van, and we watched this scene going on for 15 or 20 minutes, and the seal ran away. And it never dawned on me, why would a seal leave a great meal like that and run away from it? But I didn't know, I didn't think. So the wind was, pardon me? You mean the fox? Yes, why did the fox run away? I'm sorry. It was the fox that ran away. You can tell I'm nervous here. So anyway, the wind was blowing and there was drifting on the road a little bit, so I decided to turn around. So I turned the wheel and I made a sharp left, and as I went that way, the front wheels went off the plowed area and got stuck in the soft snow. Well, I knew that wasn't a problem. I have 19 kids in the car, and so I said, everybody out, and you guys can push me out. And so there was a sliding door on the side and a passenger door, and all 18 or 19 kids went out, and they got in the front of the truck or the van, and they were ready to push. And all of a sudden, somebody yells, "Nanook!" And all 19 kids tried to get in that van at one time. They were climbing over each other and trying to get in there and whatnot, and they broke out one of the windows on that sliding door, and they kind of pushed it in and so forth. And so we all got in, we're safe. The bear's over there about 20 yards, and he's eating on that carcass, and we're okay. I told my wife at 11 o'clock, it's about 9 o'clock, and we'll just sit here for a couple hours, and somebody will come get us, and we'll be okay. About an hour later, it was getting pretty cold in there, and it was 30 below, and the wind was blowing from that direction, and girls in there, the younger kids in the van started to get scared. They started to get cold. They started to cry. And I knew that I should probably do something. And so I formulated a plan. Now, the oldest person besides me in the van was a young lady named Marjorie. And I turned to her and I said, "Okay, Marjorie, you're going to drive." Now, I didn't take into consideration that she'd never sat in a driver's seat and she's never steered anything. But she was the oldest, so I had her come up front. I said, "Now, I'm going to take my gun and I'm going to walk between the van and the polar bear, and I'll protect you. And the rest of you kids, get out, and you'll push, and you'll get out of the thing, and I'll run out to you, and we'll be good. We'll be gone." So I gave Marjorie the quickest driving lesson ever. R means reverse, D means drive, that's the brake, that's the gas, you're on your own. Now, if you've ever watched Andy Griffith, and you see that he would give Barney one bullet for his gun. And when Andy said, "Okay, you can load it up," he would, and that was me outside that van, trying to get that bullet in there. And I got the bullet into the side chamber there, and I'm set. So I can do this. I walk in front of the van, and I go about 10 yards, and the bear's eating that carcass right there. And I plant myself with my gun, right like this. I didn't think to aim at him, pull the trigger back, get ready. I stood there. I can do this. And so I'm content. I mean, I'm intent. I'm going to take care of these kids. And I could hear them quietly get out of the van. I could hear the van backing up. And I thought, okay, we're good. And at this time, the bear noticed something, and he got up on all four paws. And I'm thinking, this is not a good situation. This is a big bear, but we're okay. I turned my head, and the van wasn't there. And I thought, okay, what happened? So I turned around, and if you've ever felt desolate and alone, when you're standing there in the middle of the Arctic and it's 30 below and you see two red lights going away from you, you can imagine how I felt. They're driving down the road. I'm standing there 10 foot with a bear on guard. My first thought was, I know what I'll do. I'm going to shoot the bear in the eye, and I'll stay on that side so we won't be able to see me. And I thought, no, I'm not that great a shot. So my second thought was, I'll use it as a club, and I'll just going to boom, and it'll be done, and we'll be over with, and I'll be a hero. But what really happened is I started to whisper, and I said, you are one big bear. And you got a great meal there, and I am not good tasting at all. And so I'm just talking as slowly and as calmly as I can, and this bear's kind of looking at me going, what is this guy? So while I'm doing this, I started to take some steps backwards. And I continue to talk with this bear, and he continues to just look at me. And I got about 10 steps back, and I said, now's the time. I turned and I ran. I ran as quick as I could, as fast as I could. I could feel that bear on the back of my neck. I didn't look back, I don't know, but I knew he was coming. I never looked back. And they had stopped, and they had started to go back really slowly. I just kept running, I kept running. I got to the van, I opened the door, I pushed her out of the seat, I got in. Now, those kids were scared. They weren't scared of the bear, they were scared of my driving. They had never gone that fast in a vehicle before. I was gone. This was on a Friday night. Saturday was fine, didn't hear nothing about it, and so we went to church Sunday morning. I thought, nobody knows, I'm okay. I walked into the church, and everybody stood up and started laughing. They had all heard. Now you're probably wondering why I'm wearing these boots out here. And so I want to tell you a little bit. The bottoms of them are made out of ugaroot skin, and the tops here are polar bear, and the very top is wolverine with calf skin. And they were given to me as a Christmas present. Now, there was a very prominent family, and the gentleman, the father, was very well respected, and he was a great hunter. And the wife was a great seamstress, and she knew how to sew skins and whatnot. And they presented these boots to me at Christmas. And by the way, their oldest daughter's name was Marjorie. Thank you very much.
Boynton. Does anybody remember Sniglets? Am I the only one who remembers that? Thank you. I felt like it was a personal experience or something. That was a comedy book in the 80s where they made up new words for things that didn't have words. I would like to coin the phrase spousenteer, which is when your spouse volunteers you for something without your consent. Okay, other memories. Ice track out at Lakeview Terrace Mobile Home Park. I blew my dad's Pontiac engine spinning Brody's backwards on the ice. I was 14, under permit to drive. It was his fault. Winter 1968. Loved going to the Upper Limits, entrance 3rd Avenue next to Co-op for good music and dancing. Good times. Anybody remember the Upper Limits? Yeah, sounds like you have a very special memory of that place. Okay. Where Sears is used to be the center. Okay, we've established that. A theater, bowling alley, roller rink, amusement park. If you could do the little, could you do the fake skydiving there? Was that something you could do? Was there an IMAX? Wow, we found something that wasn't in the center. That took a while. Upstairs was a nightclub where I saw a hypnotist. For the three volunteers on stage, he made the entire audience all look like Ronald Reagan. Wait, I think I just did it to myself. Okay, it's time for intermission now. Make sure to turn in that audience storyteller sheet right away in the information table, and we'll announce that after intermission. We'll take more memories. We have signed live event posters from previous events for $1. We have limited quantities. And we have postcards too. What the main goal of Dark Winter Nights is to share true stories from Alaska with the world, so people don't have to watch reality TV. They can actually hear it from Alaskans. So if you take one of those postcards and you put somebody's name on it who you think would like Dark Winter Nights, we will mail it for you. So just go to the information table and fill one of those out. We'll cover the postage. You can sign up for all kinds of notifications. You can go take some more pictures of the DeLorean. And then food-wise, again, we have two groups from Hutchison FFA, which I believe is doing a bake sale. And Akadeka is doing baked potatoes and chili and cupcakes. So eat up, and I will see you in 15 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right, while people are settling in here a little bit, a couple of things I want you to know about. We're working on a number of Dark Winter Nights things. We have Dark Winter Nights, the books, plural. So one is a best of Dark Winter Nights book, where it's a collection of our best stories all put together in the book. Makes a wonderful Christmas gift. That will be coming out in the next couple months. And then we have a How to Create a Storytelling Program book, which is great if you know someone who wants to create a storytelling program. It would be a great Christmas gift for them. It's a little harder to sell here. We're going to come out with the Dark Winter Nights, the TV show. This was not my idea, all right, first of all. KUAC, we're shooting it this spring. We hope to premiere in January of 2019. We'll have a live audience, so if any of you are interested in being a live audience in a TV show, I know there's a lot of opportunities to do that here in Fairbanks, but we hope they would choose us. So get notified. Sign up for our notifications so you keep on the loop on that. It's going to be kind of like Red Green meets Saturday Night Live. But KUAC does want me to point out that it is not a season. It is a pilot episode. Something about that mix is they're not so sure about. I think it might be the part that involves me. Our next live event, we're going to aim for Saturday, November 17th. That's the normal time that we were doing it before, so that's the Saturday before Thanksgiving. Same place, same time. And if anyone would like to rent a DeLorean for a party or corporate event, I'm hoping if it can start to pay for itself, my wife will let me keep it. All right, it's time for our audience storyteller. Do you remember the rules? I hope so, because it's too late now. All right, send in the bomb disposal robot. We picked it because it's the only new toy I have that rolls. Oh, no, no, no. There we go. Left. I'm not moving. You're going to have to come to me. Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah, payback. That's surprisingly hard to do. You know, there are key moments in life that can really change things for a person. I was just thinking that. It doesn't have anything to do with this. Mercia is our audience storyteller this evening. Let's have a round of applause for Mercia. All right. Well, she's coming up. She's coming. Couple of memories. The Dairy Queen that blew up. My husband was helping a friend fix his truck in that parking lot that night. Honest, he had nothing to do with the explosion. Right. I won a $5 gift certificate to Clown Town that used to be in the Bentley Mall. My mom would take me as she would visit the sewing store, Strawberry Ridge. Then we'd stop by Walden Books. If I was lucky, the whole family would head next door to Klinkendoggers. This sounds made up to me. Is this like a strawberry shortcake land that you're telling me about? I don't know. None of those sound like real words. 2 Street Avenue memory, aka 2nd Street, 1971, height of the pipeline boom. 2nd Street, bar to bar from Cushman to the Lathrop building. There was a major wildfire that needed Cruz, the Fairbanks area fire management officer at the time, pulled up, took the 26-foot stake side truck and went to 2nd Street. He parked in front of the largest bar and said, "Fire call." The first 20 guys who climbed up and over the stake side were hired. If they were too drunk, they never made it. Okay, we have Mercia here. Mercia, you look a lot like Chris Solinski from our team here. That's seems a little unfair. Yeah, round of applause. Have a seat. All right, we're going to get this mic good and close to you, all right? I'll take it. You want me to get that? Now you're stuck.
Yes.
Okay, that's not funny to everybody, all right.
Good evening. I was talked into this by my youngest offspring. She has heard this story many times, and she thought other people might want to hear it. So here goes. I read a lot of what I considered adventure stories. I'm way down at the other end of the continent. I'm in the deep south, and I leave the deep south, the Mississippi River, to come to the far north, to the Yukon River, to work in a bush hospital in Tanana, Alaska. I followed my directions to the letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The first joke on me was, we so used to using acronyms instead of a word, it becomes a word. I'm going to Alaska to work for the BIA and not registering what the I stood for. And the most ironic joke on me was, I married an Indian. I prefer the term indigenous people, but anyway. So here I am, following my directives from the BIA, knowing nothing about Alaska, and I have a clothing list that I am to bring with me. I'm not to bring any summer clothes. I am not to bring any other dresses but my nurse's uniforms. I land in Juneau on the 9th of July, and All I have with me is winter clothes. Thank you, government agency. Well, by the time paperwork was taken care of and I go to Tanno, where I'm to live and to work, in the middle of July, here I land at the little airfield. The flowers are blooming in profusion along the airfield, beautiful flowers, still knowing nothing about Alaska, thinking all the indigenous people were Eskimos, not knowing there were Indians here. Anyway, so the doctor there, I think she's still in Anchorage, there was a female doctor and 5 staff, all females. Well, we got a lot of visits from Galena Air Force Base, from the flyboys. For more reasons than one. I found out later that my boss, the doctor, who was only 2 years older than me, her uncle was commander of all armed forces in Alaska. No wonder those flyboys visited us. So anyway, it's July and it's August, and I'm thoroughly enamored with that river. I still love that river. And summer works out pretty well. Some of my duties, but BIA had these desk jockeys coming up because they got airfare, they got per diem to come up and look around and pretend they had business there. And so one woman, whatever her, after over 60 years, I forgot what her job was, her job title was. But she decided there were 2 of us, licensed practical nurses, well trained. She decided we were not nurses, so we couldn't do any nursing. Added to that, all of the TB patients had been sent to the newly opened Seward Sanitarium, so we had no real acute patients. All the acute patients were sent to Fairbanks at this time. You have to realize this is pre-statehood, so there's not much to do if I wasn't allowed to be a nurse. So I had assignments like go pick blueberries for the patient's pancakes tomorrow morning, make drapes for the dining room, fill out orders to Montgomery Ward catalog for the children's pajamas. This isn't nursing, and I'm frustrated. Added to that, the acting head nurse had applied for transfer. For 2 years she was waiting and had not been transferred. So she had resigned and was just biding her time. And in the meantime, one of the local boys, anyhow, a pair of hazel eyes came through on his way back to Fairbanks to work out of the Union Hall. So all of that, I resigned, and I came to Fairbanks. So I thought I was coming to Fairbanks. So I have nothing to do but walk up and down and visit with the river and the people. There was one woman in town who had a boat with a cabin on it, and she was very particular about who was taking the rides in her boat. Not very many people were invited on Maggie Elliott's boat. So I'm walking up and down, and she invited me in her boat. I didn't realize I was special. Oh yes, I jumped in, well, by this time it's September. Freezing rain, the wind blowing horizontally across the river, the rain turning into sleet or snow. So I get in the boat. Oh boy, I'm an adventure. That's what I came here looking for, adventure. I'm having an adventure. I'm getting in this small boat and I'm going down the river to visit people who live down the river. We had just sat down to fresh caught salmon and some fresh vegetables of some kind, cooked in a stack oven. And some of you long-time Alaskans know what that is. When here comes, now by this time it's getting dark. It's almost 9 o'clock, say 8 o'clock. But anyway, the boat stopped. A man comes running up the bank. Oh, good, the nurse is here. I'm not a nurse anymore, I resigned. We have this girl on the boat having a baby. Uh-oh. So everybody insists, so I put my parka on and I jump and I go down to get in the boat with him. Now this boat is about 14 feet long. There are 2 men driving the boat, handling the boat. There's 2 12-year-old boys at the other end of the boat. And laying flat in the boat is this 15-year-old girl in her 30th hour of labor. She's laying flat and she's covered with a water repellent sleeping bag that zipped down flat. And at her head sits this old lady, and in 1954, to me, she was an old lady, right? Right now, I'm 40 years older than she was then. Not quite, but anyway, 30 years older than that. But anyway, and she has a pet milk carton full of homebrew bottles, drinking them one at a time, throwing the bottles into the Yukon River. It's getting dark, the northern lights are out, and she's filling this girl's head with all sorts of superstitions about the northern lights. When they move, that's Utlani, which is close as I can make that Indian word. It's bad luck, so something's gonna happen. Now this girl is, number one, she'd been left by her parents and those 2 boys, and somebody had rescued her and got her into the boat and got somebody in the boat. And she's uneasy, to say the least. And this old lady, oh, this is bad luck and what's going to happen. And so I said, well, the northern lights, if they move, it's bad luck. They always move. Where'd that come from? Well, I think it came out of one of those homebrew bottles. But anyway, now here I am in a boat. There's no room for me anywhere in this boat. It's loaded. The 2 men and the old lady in front, she's laying, and she was about 5 feet 8 inches tall. She was not a small child. And these 2 boys at her feet. Now, for me to get into the boat, the boys had to get out. Her brother was one of the boys, and he was frightened to death. He didn't know what was happening to his sister. I was surprised by that, because on the Yukon River in 1950s, a 12-year-old boy that didn't know what having a baby was about really surprised me, because a lot of 12-year-olds were making babies. So anyway, I get in the boat. Now I'm sitting cross-legged at her feet. And we going upriver in an overloaded boat, in the dark, in the cold, driving rain, freezing rain by this time. And So I began talking to her and making conversation and check out what I knew about normal delivery. And when I find out how many hours she had been in labor, I was surprised she could even talk to me anymore. So pretty soon, for me to check and find out what was going on with her, I had to get down on my elbows to lift this thing she was covered with, because if I sat up, it would pull it up on the sides about 5 inches and let that cold, freezing rain in. So I couldn't do that. So I'm down on my belly on my elbows. And I'm biding time, and I'm wondering how long and we're taking so slow to get up current to the hospital. And to this day, they are both dead. But those 2 men manning that boat earned my utter respect for in the dark to know that river so well to get us safely to the hospital with no trouble. But before we got there, she told me, something's happening. So I go down on my elbows to see what's happening. Aha. What's happening was the crown of a little head of black hair says, ready or not, here I come. We're still miles from the river. So here I am in this real dignified position, and into these hands was delivered over almost 10-pound baby girl. Now, I had gotten into that boat for moral support, I told myself. I did not expect anything to be any more than that. Nothing was expected from me for that. Now, here I am with a newborn baby in freezing conditions. There's nothing to wrap the baby in, and the mother has been so long in heavy labor, and she's covered with so much stuff, a feather bed and all sorts of things. She had on her normal winter underwear, men's long johns. I don't know how many, maybe 4 layers of clothing, and she was perspiring till she was wet. Well, all my self-confidence went downriver. What are we going to do now? I'm so afraid of her getting chilled because she's wet from sweating. After all, it is called labor, isn't it? And there's nothing to put on the baby. And of course, living on the river, and I was taught to cut the umbilical cord right away. Now, any of you who knows anything about nursing, we know we don't do that anymore. Anyway, so in my pocket is my trusty pocket knife. And one of the men took his shoestring out and was handing it down to me, which it didn't reach me. And I pulled the drawstring from the hood of my parka. Real sterile conditions. So that taken care of, then I am really worried. And it seemed like we were taking longer and longer and longer to get to the hospital. My concern kept going back to this baby and no clothing, not even a blanket, nothing. And she was still putting out a lot of heat. So I put the baby against her thigh and wrapped this feather bed that was underneath her around the baby to keep her warm. Where that he come from? And I held my hand with just enough to her face so that she had just enough place to breathe. Because that baby was breathing. She was yelling before her feet were out. She was ready. So we made it to the hospital. Thank God. And that was over 60 years ago. So we got to the hospital, and both mother and baby were checked out by the doctor, and everything was fine. The mother has died some years ago. The baby, the last time I saw her, she was dancing with a troop of dancers. And as far as I know, she's still mayor of the village.
Thank you very much. Good job.
God works in mysterious ways.
Yes, he does. All right.
That doesn't hurt.
Okay, I'll hold the chair. There you go. You got it? All right, thank you. Mercia, ladies and gentlemen. You know, the problem with stories like that is it makes it look like this is easy. We can just randomly pull people from the audience and they have stories about delivering babies in the middle of the boat who become mayors. Yeah. Sure. Okay, a couple of memories here. We have a sister city program with Yakutsk. Is that how you say that? Thank you. In Siberia, the Russians came to visit us a couple of times in the 90s, and we sent a couple of Fairbanks delegations there. Let's do it again. With missiles this time. Early 1980s Fairbanks, summer, West Airport Way would shut down. Hundreds of Fairbanksans standing on buildings, lining the side streets. Does anybody know what was going on? It was drag racing day, a quarter mile down Airport Way. Burning tires, loud engines, good times. We used to have a Nordstrom in Fairbanks, and the building so run down the company closed the store out of embarrassment. That's, okay, just between you and me, that's how I felt about the Radio Shack. I thought it's the only Radio Shack that literally looks like a shack. Sometimes in our lives we find ourselves literally living through a metaphor for our lives. Have you ever experienced anything like that? For example, about a year after I bought the DeLorean, the brakes seized up. I thought something weird was going on. And so I pulled over and smoke started pouring out of one of the wheel wells. And I stand there and sort of realized that my dream car might be about to go up in flames, and all I had was a Diet Pepsi. And I wasn't sure if that was what you should pour on it or not. And that's when I realized I was living through a metaphor for my own life. I want something really bad, I get it, it bursts into flames. Yeah. Anybody have a Diet Pepsi? I'm supposed to be the funny one here. Stop with your upstaging me. Our next storyteller found herself struggling to stay alive in both her actual life journey and her metaphorical journey, if that makes any sense. But it wasn't going to take her down. She decided she wasn't taking nothing from nobody anymore. Here's Dr. Jessie Robertson with a story we call Hike of My Life.
Hello, that's a hard act to follow. So, obviously, Alaska is a very extreme place, which can make it hard to go through hard things. But it's also an incredible landscape for personal redemption, and that's what this story is about. So I don't know how often we can identify one day in our lives when everything changes, when we face down our demons and we start to move forward one step at a time. So it was mid-August 2014, and I was coming off of the darkest 3 to 4 years of my life. I was at the bottom of a hole that I didn't know how to get out of. What kicked off that 3 to 4 years is I got divorced after being married for 10 years, and even under the best of circumstances, which this was, divorce is very difficult and it's very isolating. And I made the very unwise choice to get into a relationship right away because I couldn't sit in my own loneliness. So this was a terrible relationship, and I know we all know the kind. For me, this one spun me round and round until I wanted to vomit. It wrung me out all the way to my bones, and it left me with nothing, not even a safe home. It felt like there was a 1,000-pound weight on my body, but all of my cells were shaking all of the time. You see, I had abandoned myself to make room for somebody who needed far more room than I could ever give. The weekend that this person left forever, the sky opened up in a torrential downpour as if in solidarity with me. I sat on the floor of my cabin out on 10 acres in the middle of nowhere, and that 1,000-pound weight sat on me. And I had sat on that floor so many times over the years in my own despair. Then I looked around my cabin and all of the reminders of the last 3 years, and this little fire started to burn inside of me, this defiance. And I got up and I grabbed all of my furniture and I shoved it out into the driveway. My table, my chairs, my couch, my bed, you name it, it went into the driveway. What was funny about it is that it took the two of us arguing for 2 hours to get the couch in, and it took me 5 minutes to get it out. So I had this pile of crap in the driveway, which my friend and future husband Matt came and got later that week. Then a week later, I was determined to go on an adventure, and nobody was going to stop me. So I wanted to do the Kasugi Ridge Trail. This is a point-to-point hike that parallels the park's highway, and it's in Denali State Park. In case you don't know what a point-to-point hike is, where you start the hike is not where you end the hike. So where you end the hike, you have to take a car or a bike or something to get back to the beginning. So the way this Kasugi Ridge Trail is when you come from Fairbanks, you typically park at the Little Coal Creek trailhead, and there's 3 options to exit the trail. The first is 17.5 miles, and you exit at the Ermine Trail. The second exit, you exit at the Byers Lake Trail, and that's about, I think, 27 miles. And the third exit is the Troublesome Creek Trail, and that's about 36 miles in total. I was intending to do the first leg of this, the 17.5 miles from Little Coal Creek up to Kasugi Ridge and down the Ermine Trail, and I was going to stash a bike in the bushes and ride that the 8 miles back to my car. What could go wrong? So obviously I'm here, so something went wrong. So I got out of bed that Sunday morning, and I was like one of those little wind-up cars I had as a kid, you know, the kind you pull back and you let it go, except I'd been pulled back for 4 years, right? So I got out of bed like, I'm gonna go. And I get up and I pack my backpack. I have a can of bear spray, a liter of water, a little bit of food. I'm wearing what would be like a trail running outfit with a cute skirt. And I head to my work because a person who worked for me several years before had abandoned a bike there. So I went and got the bike, I wrestled it into my Subaru, and I was off to the trailhead. And I sang at the top of my lungs because I never had to listen to techno ever again for as long as I lived. So I got to the trail, and so essentially I drive past the Little Coal Creek trailhead to the Ermine trailhead. I stash the bike in some bushes, and I drive the 8 miles back to the Little Coal Creek trailhead. I get out of my car and I head into the forest. And it sounds cliche, but I love the autumn time. The air is crisp, it's alive. It's almost like this fresh feeling took over. And it was the type of forest that I walked into that I'm familiar with because I'm a boreal forest ecologist at UAF. And I saw the birch and aspen trees, the leaves were changing color, and when the sun hit it, it's just like the whole forest glowed. And I could breathe. I could finally breathe after all these years. And the air just felt crisp and clean. And I just slowly walked along, and I enjoyed the forest. It was beautiful. I passed a pond on my left. I made it to some switchbacks, And I went up the switchbacks, which would lead me to the Ridgeline Trail, and I got to the top, and I looked back across the valley. The park's highway was in the valley, and everything felt so small in the distance. I saw the Alaska Range across the valley. And in front of me in the trail, the tundra was starting to turn red and orange. There was still some green. It was this beautiful carpet. So I headed down the trail. And I crossed a rocky area, and after that point is really when the Ridgeline Trail opens up. So I could see this kind of rutted trail going in front of me, and on the right-hand side, it drops off fairly quickly into the valley, and across the valley again was the Alaska Range, and Denali was coming out. And on the left-hand side, there were rolling hills, and there was just this carpet of color in front of me. And I moved at a pretty leisurely pace. I had started this hike from my car at about 12:30, so it was nice and late in the day. So I had my phone, and I turned on the GPS when I started the hike, and I had ripped a page out of the trail guide, the Alaska Trail Guide, and it was a verbal description of the trail, so it wasn't the map. And it's not like it was a mile-by-mile description. It was more like I was looking for major markers. And the primary marker I was looking for was a big rocky area where apparently the turnoff for the Ermine Trail is, and I just head down the valley. And since I was really just looking for that marker, I felt fairly relaxed. One of the things I decided is if I was going to turn back, it would have to be before the halfway point, obviously. So with my GPS, with my phone and this little piece of paper, so I understand uncertainty and variability because I'm a scientist. So I know that the GPS on my phone probably isn't that great. And then this description is okay, except it only really works when I hit these major markers. So if I put these two pieces of variability together, I might get to where I'm going. So I move along the trail at a leisurely pace, and my brain is quiet for the first time in years, just enjoying the day. And at about 4:30, I hit the midway point. I had gone about 8.5 miles-ish, because I checked the GPS and it was an ish. And what I realized in that moment is I couldn't go back. There was no force on this planet that could make me go back the way that I had come. I couldn't go back to the storm. So I decided to keep pushing forward. There was a fearless momentum to my day. But what I noticed in that instant is that there's actually a storm brewing behind me. Now, I'm a reasonably intelligent person, I think, and now I know it's not good to be on a ridgeline when there's a storm, but today was not a day for logic. So I decided to press ahead, and it felt like the storm gave chase. It felt really invigorating to be up there, just this big sky. So I decided, well, okay, it's 4:30. I have another, let's call it 9-ish miles to go. So I should probably start picking up the pace. And I didn't want to race through it because I wanted to enjoy the day. So I started to jog, and it started to rain. And then it rained the rest of the day. So I'm jogging along, and I'm having a pretty good time. I know I need to cover 5 miles from the midpoint to the rocky area. So I start setting goals for myself. Okay, I'll hit 11 miles at such and such time. I'm doing okay. I'm starting to get a little worried with my uncertainty here in my hands as I try to find the rocks. Getting a little anxious, still enjoying my day. And then finally, I see the rocks. And I think, great. All I have to do is head down the trail, get on the bike. So I get to the rocky area, and it is my impression that the turnoff to Ermine Trail should be right there. So, and it's not a small rocky area, it's kind of a decent size. So I start following little spur trails, some going the wrong direction, some just cut off. I'm starting to get confused. I started looking for 20 minutes. You know, this time it's probably about 6 o'clock, and the day is definitely aging. And I just start to panic, because one of the things in the pit of my stomach is that if I miss the turnoff for the Ermine Trail, there won't be another turnoff for another, 10 miles or something. So what's interesting about having a brain that's been under a lot of stress and anxiety for 3 to 4 years, basically a traumatized brain, is it's as if tracks are laid in it for these intense feelings to come in and take over and just cocoon your body. So these feelings don't just sneak in the door, they kick open the door. So anxiety, fear, helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness, and they just started sinking in, and they just moved right into those tracks, and it gripped my brain, and it took over all of my cells, and I just felt paralyzed. And I just sunk down into this black hole that I'd sunk into so many times over the years, and I sat on the ground, and it just encompassed me, and I felt paralyzed. And I had felt this way so many times over the years, like I'd been sitting on the floor of my cabin again. And I was wet, and I was cold, and I was out of food, and I didn't have a flashlight, and the only person who knew exactly where I was was coming back from a hunting trip like late that night. So there I was, and I was pretty convinced I was lost. And then this little light started to grow in me again, and it was the same light that grew the week before when I drug all my crap into the driveway. And it grew like this fight, and I call it my inner Bon Jovi, where you live for the fight when that's all that you've got. And that's what I had. I had my fight, and that's what grew. And it grew, and it grew, and I had this like, wait a goddamn minute. This is a solvable problem. I have my GPS, it's wet, and I have my wet piece of paper, and these two things this thing says I've gone about 5 miles, and this thing says I'm supposed to turn off on a trail by some rocks. Now, I check with the jury, we're on Kasugi Ridge, right? Yes, we are. So, I just decide this is a solvable problem, damn it, and so I get up, I pull myself together, and I start looking around the rocks some more, convinced this trail should go off into the valley. And I'm convinced our brains don't let us see things until we're ready to see them. So I went to the other side of the rocks, and I found the continuation of the Kasugi Trail. So I jumped on that, head down that, and sure enough, off in the saddle, I see a small trail heading off to the right, and I think, damn, I made it. So if I get on that trail, all I have to do is it's another 4 miles back to the bike, no problem. If I'm running a good clip, I could do that in under an hour. So I hang a hard right, I go down the Ermine Trail, and I actually couldn't run it, and here's why. So it was actually pretty muddy, and it was that deep mud where it's over your ankle, sometimes up to your shin, so I tried this business. But the trail was flanked on either side by pretty dense shrubs that were tall. So there were a couple things going on there. The first thing is that when I had to step back into the mud, there was this, my shoe would get sucked off. So I'd have to put my shoe back on, and then put it back on, and then some of this. And I was nervous as well because I've worked in the field alone quite a bit, and I know that feeling in the pit of my stomach when I'm in shrubs. And I know that a bear can very easily charge through the shrubs and kill me. So I got out my bear spray, and at that point commenced a 4-mile screaming monologue. It started off with, hey, bear, and then it ended with all kinds of other things. I think I vented a lot of anger while getting rid of the bear. So I, for a while, and then I end up at the top of these switchbacks. And there's actually a route ladder that cuts off about a half a mile, which would have been useful at this point because it was feeling pretty dark and the clouds made it feel darker. Well, the route ladder was pretty wet, and it would have gone down on my face, very likely, so I decided to take the switchbacks down. So I thought that my bike would be at the bottom of the switchbacks, and then I'm out of there. So I get to the bottom of the switchbacks, and I end up in the forest. So what I didn't realize is there is still another, let's call it, 2-ish miles to go. Okay, so at this point, I'm absolutely soaked to the bone. I'm shaking, I'm shivering really hard. I'd run out of food. I didn't feel like drinking water anymore. I was exhausted. I was not anticipating running this far that day. But I kept going. And then I started to see the fresh bear tracks and realized maybe running isn't the greatest idea. I was afraid something would give chase, so I did sort of this speed walk jog thing. And then, as if to add a crown to the day, I slipped in this giant mud puddle, and mud went everywhere. It went in my underwear, up my shirt, in my hair, on my face, everywhere. God! So I get up, and I continue my little walk-jog thing looking for the bear and shouting. Then by 8 o'clock at night, I see a break in the forest. I see the highway. I hear the cars, and I think, all I have to do is get on my bike and ride the 8 miles to the car. So I get to my bike, and what's interesting at this point is so I'm numb. I'm numb from my fingertips, up my arms, my toes, up my legs. The only part that isn't numb is right here. So, and what's interesting about that is my brain started to change. I found it very hard to make decisions. Even the decision to get on the bicycle was hard. But I get on the bike, I start pedaling. I'm lucky the cars can still see me at 8 o'clock, and it's really hard to ride. I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? And I looked down, and the brake pads were actually, looked like they were attached to the, like stuck to the wheels. I don't know the component parts, sorry. So I jumped off, and I undid the brake pads, and I thought, all right, here we go. And get back on. It was easier to ride, but it was still hard, and the chain kept falling off. So I looked down, and everything was rusted. And so I sort of and I was getting splashed by cars, because that's what happens. And I'd pull off periodically to cry. There was like a gravel ditch. There was a gravel area on the side of the road, and I got off and I cried. And then I made the decision to get back on the bike, and And an hour and a half later, it took me an hour and a half to go 8 miles, I made it back to the little Coal Creek parking lot. So I looked at this bike and now understood clearly why it had been abandoned. So I threw it into a ditch, and I went to my car, and as we learned from Amanda, you got to get naked if you're really cold and wet. So I took off all of my clothes in the little Coal Creek parking lot, because whatever. And I'm pretty disorganized and messy, so there's enough kind of clothes in my car that I could sort out an outfit. And I didn't have underwear. I didn't have socks, no underwear or socks, but I kind of made it work, and I put it on, and it was muddy and ridiculous. And then I got in my car and turned it on and started warming up, and I remember gripping the steering wheel like, oh my God, I did it. So I realized a woman did die up on that ridge, and it was the woman that put up with bullshit. So she's dead. And I drove to the nearest gas station, whatever that was, and I looked pretty disheveled, and it was sort of a, where's the Snickers? And I filled my arms with Snickers and potato chips and Coca-Cola, and the guy behind the counter was like, what is this? And I got in my car and made it home a little bit after midnight, and about 12:30, so about 12 hours after this whole thing started. And then I started therapy the next week. So I have some takeaway lessons from this. The first is we're a very mind-your-own-business type of culture, and I don't know how well we all tend to each other's pain. And here's the thing about everybody. We've all sat in our own dirty diaper too long, and we're filled with shame about it. And so if you see someone that's hurting, ask them. And if you are hurting, like I was, and you're swimming in your own shame and dirty diaper, tell somebody. And I swore I'd try to remember this, but I can't. So that day reminds me of my favorite poem of all time by William Ernest Henley called Invictus. And I won't read the whole thing, but the part that this reminds me of is this. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. So that day is important to me because I had to walk to the edge and look off to know where the edge is, and to remind myself that I'm still here and that I deserve to take up space on this planet, that I deserve to set limits and have those limits be respected, and I don't have to put up with bullshit in order for that to happen. So, if you ever feel like you need to walk to the edge and look off to reassert whatever it is you need to learn about yourself, here's my suggestion. Bring a friend. Bring a tent. Bring a GPS, and bring a functional bicycle.
Dr. Jessie Robertson. Tiki Cove Restaurant on top of the Polaris building, good Chinese food and good view. That's where the after party will be. Lola's Pizza Cache on South Cushman. On the right-hand side, okay? Coming from the north or the south. And the Silver Spur on the Old Ridge, two-stepping in Fairbanks seems non-existent since that place became a pawn shop. Which is funny because I'd go in there and be like, wow, this would be a great country western bar. I don't know why nobody thought of that. All right, our next storyteller. We first heard his story from story producer Katie Ott, and we just knew little bits of the story, but we knew it involved a helicopter, a polar bear, an airplane, researchers, sea ice, and night falling. And we were like, wait, what? What's going on with this? So then we heard the recording of the story, and we actually only had more questions. So, up next with a story that's packed full, so full of Alaskan stuff that it can barely take it. Here's Mike Spindler with a story we call Fire on Ice.
This story occurred 30 miles northwest of Shishmaref, March 23rd, 1988. I was flying Polar Bear, radio tracking support for a helicopter. How many people here have been out on the sea ice away from the sight of land? Raise your hands. If not on the sea ice, then how many people out in the open ocean away from the sight of land? Raise your hands. How many pilots do we have here? Raise your hands. How many instrument pilots or night VFR current pilots are there? Okay, darken the lights and imagine you're out over the sea ice at night. The story begins departing Kotzebue, Alaska, on a beautiful, clear, but cold, calm morning, minus 25. Helicopter and Super Cub flying in formation, southwest bound over the sea ice. I was in the Super Cub. In the helicopter was Gunnar, the pilot, Vic, a biologist, and Jerry, a biologist, and a guy named Bruce, a journalist. So we headed out. Biologists were concerned about polar bears because there was oil development at Prudhoe Bay, and a decade earlier, they cut out all sport hunting in the United States, in Alaska, over population concerns. So biologists wanted to know if the bears were moving between the Beaufort and the Chukchi Sea or eastern Russia. And to do this, they needed radio collars on the bears. So helicopter flies out over the ice, support aircraft flies out over the ice. I'd go ahead, sometimes 10, 20 miles ahead, while they were working on a bear, looking for the next bear. I'd radio, okay, I got another customer for you, Gunnar, and give them a direction and distance. We were using shore-based navigation then. I was really looking hard for polar bears that day, but we only found two. Only one was in a place that could be worked by the helicopter. So a little bit about the navigation. There was shore stations at Shishmaref and at Kotzebue, and so we could figure out our position accurately if you wanted to by putting a chart on your lap and and a protractor and getting the angle from those two shore stations, and where those two lines intersected, that was your position. So you can imagine how practical that was in a Super Cub or a helicopter with a stick, the throttle, or the helicopter pilot with their hands on the collective and on the stick. Get out that chart, get out that protractor, let's figure out where we are. Well, there's a new thing just coming out just then, new for aviation, had been used for quite a while for shipping, and that was marine LORAN. And we were using the signals from a triangle of stations formed by Nome, Attu, and Kodiak, supporting the Bering Sea fishing fleet and shipping. And inside that triangle, those were accurate to less than a half a mile and highly reliable. Well, we were well north of that triangle, and even if it was good for 1 or 2 or 3 miles, that was still better than nothing, because otherwise it's all sea ice. or protractors. So, but the worst thing about it was sometimes it wouldn't work at all. Well, Bruce, the journalist and photographer, wanted to photograph the operation, but the helicopter could not do all the maneuvering it had to, because when you're collaring a bear, a biologist has to lean out the door with a gun, a tranquilizer dart gun, and the helicopter maneuvers very low over the bear, probably 10 or 15 feet, and fires a dart, tries to get it into the rump of the bear. Because of the added weight of the journalist, he had to stay behind on the ice at a place that I picked out to land. So the plan was then, normal situations, the helicopter would stay with the biologists while they worked on the bear, and it took them about an hour to do the data and fit the collar. But this time, because he had to come get Bruce over where I was, he lifted off. All the survival gear was in the helicopter and not with the guys on the ice. So Bruce was looking at the helicopter. We couldn't see when they were darting. They were over the horizon, but helicopter lifted off from the guys and headed our way, and soon we could see him. So Bruce, kind of absent-mindedly while we're waiting, just kind of scuffs the snow like that, makes an arrow pointing the direction where the helicopter was coming from. That arrow was going to be really important later in the day. It was already getting to be late afternoon because we'd been looking all morning and unsuccessfully. So I hear on the radio, Bruce is looking, binoculars, and I'm on the radio, headphones outside the cockpit, we're standing outside. And I hear, "Do you read me?" "Yeah, read you loud and clear, Gunner." "Do you read me?" "How do you read?" I said, "Loud and clear." Long radio silence. It's not a good thing. I think he realized it about the same time I realized that the biologist's portable radio wasn't working. So Gunner landed where I was, said, "You know, I couldn't get a Loran fix for those guys, and the radio doesn't work. We got to go look for them." So Bruce gets in the helicopter, and I get in the Cub, and Gunner and Bruce do a grid search back and forth, where Gunner thought the guys were. Used up all his fuel, had to come back and land on the Ice Pan Airport. And we rendezvous again. I was in the Cub. I flew up higher and around a little bit further distance trying to find him. As the day wore on, the shadows behind the pressure ridges were getting long. Finding those guys without a radio or without a Loran fix was way worse than looking for a needle in a haystack. We decided on the ice pan what to do. We had to get those guys off the ice. It was going to get cold that night. There was a waking up bear wandering around near them or near us. We couldn't overnight the aircraft on the sea ice. The engines wouldn't restart the next morning without electricity to plug them in. But worse, the ice is moving. Even if we knew where they were, they may not be there the next day. The airport we were using might not be there the next day. The ice is always moving. Open leads can open up. Open water where polar bears hunt, the seals. I had selected that ice pan earlier because it was handy to where the bear was that we did find. So I decide that, my wing tanks are full. I got lots of gas, and I've emptied my belly tank. I can go get some jet fuel because Gunner was out of jet fuel. There was a cache at the airport at Shishmaref. I hadn't seen it. I just was told that it was there. So I took off once again, Bruce and Gunner waiting on the ice. I head out towards Shishmaref. It's starting to get dark now. I'm looking over the area where we were just searching with no luck. I'm following the radio beacon into Shishmaref. Pretty easy to go inbound to the station, just glued on the gauges like that, flying around. I hear it's Cessna 172 call traffic over Shishmaref. Pilot's name was Paul. I said, "Do you have much fuel on board, Paul?" He was flying along the north shore of the Seward Peninsula on a long flight towards Kotzebue, and he had just filled up. "Yeah, I have plenty of fuel." I said, "We could sure use some help out here. We got 2 guys out on the ice. We can't find them. We're hoping they got some way to signal. Could you go out there and look while I go get some jet fuel for the helicopter?" And he says, "Sure." He had 2 passengers on board. They were up for an adventure, I guess. So I give him a rough approximate bearing outbound from Shishmaref and head on in. I told him Gunner was out there with the helicopter. If he heard him overhead, he'd call him on the radio. And so Paul gets out over the helicopter. Gunner fires up the radio and says, "You fly this compass bearing outbound a few minutes, and you'll be in the approximate area where the guys are." That arrow that Bruce put in the snow is how he based that compass bearing. So I land at Shishmaref. I walk around the airport looking around. Where's that fuel? Oh, there's a bunch of, looks like in a snowdrift over there. So I have to dig out a drum of fuel from the snowdrift, round up a barrel pump and a hose and a filter, and get it all set up to pump it into my belly tank. And so I'm pumping the hand pump really, really, really fast, in a hurry, and also worried, because how am I going to pull off a landing at nighttime on sea ice? A little bit about ice landings. When a pilot learns to fly skis on an airplane, they learn there's a lot of variables like snow depth, temperature, thickness of the ice. They all come into play in the performance of the plane and success of the takeoff and landing. It's even more complicated out on the sea ice because the saltwater ice, when it first freezes, is this dark, dark greenish gray, and it actually does this. When you get it a little bit colder and more solidly frozen, it starts turning lighter. Medium green, still no good. Light green, robin egg blue, green, white, it's good to land on. But the pilot needs to learn to be careful that fresh snow could cover weak ice, so you often have to touch down briefly and pull back up again. And the other thing they learn is that saltwater ice has a lot more friction than freshwater ice or snow. It takes a lot longer to take off. You need more distance. So I am now full of jet fuel, very heavy, wing tanks almost full. Take off, headed back out over the sea ice. This time I'm going outbound from the station. A little more difficult. I got to do time, speed, and distance calculations in my head while I'm concentrating on those gauges, keeping the plane right side up. And I'm thinking, okay, I'd asked Gunner to turn on his lights when I got close. And I told Bruce, among 2 aircraft and 3 people, there was only 1 flashlight. So I told Bruce to go down to the far end of the ice pan that we were working. This ice pan was surrounded by pressure ridges. They were about 15 feet high. Foreign when other ice pans collide with it, as the ice is always moving. I said, "Bruce, go to that far end, and I want you to wave that flashlight when I get overhead, just like the airliners being guided into their parking places." So I come in, and I'm on final approach. Bruce is waving the light. I knew it's pretty short. I know pretty heavy. So I come right in over the top of the pressure ridge. I later found out Bruce had to dive out of the way. He was worried I was going to hit him. Bruce and Gunner had got some cardboard and some newspapers that was packing material for the radio collars in the helicopter. They soaked them in jet fuel and set them out on the ice and ran down the runway, lighting them off. It was that fire on ice that made this operation possible and safer. Ingenuity. Well, I landed, got out of the Super Cub. As the cold air hit me, I was pretty jittery, and we proceeded to pump the jet fuel back into the tank of the helicopter, just really hurrying up. And so then Paul's still circling. He must have been circling well over 2 hours with his passengers on board. A few of them got sick because of all the circles. But so now Gunner's getting directions from the airplane up in the sky. So Gunner comes over the sea ice in that same direction from Bruce's arrow. And then Paul guides him in. What happened was Vic, one of the biologists, had a pen light, just one of those little teeny pen lights. That was back in the days before everybody had a little LED headlamp or something like that. He had a little pen light like that. And when Paul had gone overhead, he flashed the light. And Paul kept circling and circling and circling. Hold that position. Loran wasn't working. There was no GPS in those days. So Paul guided him in, then went on his way. We thanked him. Bruce, being the journalist, when they landed, he asks the biologist, "What about the bear? What about the bear?" And Jerry says, "Oh, he just got up and walked away. We hid behind a pressure ridge." Well, I called Vic just last weekend. I called him because I was trying to remember all the parts of the story. And Vic told me the bear was the least of our problems. We had a gun. It was really cold. They just had bunny boots and coveralls. Jerry had left his parka in the helicopter, no survival gear, no matches. They had a little piece of plastic that was the case for some darts that was in their day packs. All their day packs had was scientific gear and their lunches. They had scraped out a little teeny place in the pressure ridge, big enough for one person to be in if they had to spend the night. And Vic says, we wouldn't have made it through the night. So finally, Vic, Jerry, Bruce, Gunner reunited in the helicopter with only 30 gallons of fuel. Helicopters are thirsty. So they had to go ashore back to the jet fuel cache to pump more to make it back to Kotzebue. And I took off directly from the ice pan, headed back to Kotzebue, following the radio beacon inbound. Again, concentrating on my instruments, my 6 flight instruments. And 2 in the morning, after an exhausting day, just struggling to stay awake. But I landed, and the helicopter landed. I waited till they got in a few hours later. It was the fire on ice incident and a few others like it associated with that project caused Department of Interior to clean up their policies and procedures for remote work like that. But what really made the changes was the unfortunate loss of 2 biologists and their pilot in a twin-engine Aero Commander flying very far offshore of Utqiagvik, Barrow, in October of 1990. They searched for 3 weeks for that aircraft, never found a trace. Now, people take it for granted. Their cell phones in their pocket with a GPS. We have GPS. We have satellite phones. We have automatic flight following where dispatcher can look at the airplane on the screen at all times, know where it is, know how fast it's flying, what its altitude and direction is, all remotely. There's a tremendous safety net for pilots and biologists working out in the field. But I think back to those lessons, the ingenuity, when you didn't have all that stuff, and I think back to the mentor pilots who taught me a lot of the tricks of the trade, and I take it and put it all together. I wouldn't be standing here today without all those lessons learned. Thank you.
The original Whole Earth Exchange on College Road with the freebie platform out back. Clinker Daggers, nice restaurant in Bentley Mall. The servers wore costumes. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's hard to tell. Into the Woods, early 2000s. I bought several bags of weed there, but they sold used books too. Leave that one alone. All right, our final storyteller tonight is a career police officer. He worked as a peace officer up in Utqiagvik, the city formerly known as Barrow. He's also served as police chief at UAF and elsewhere. He works above me at UAF, but he's not my boss. He literally works on the floor above me at UAF. And I have literally spent years bugging him for a story because we know that police officers have incredible stories. Finally got him to sit down with me last fall, and he starts telling me a story about someone trying to kill him with an ulu. And I was like, it's kind of awkward. I don't know how to break it to him. I'm not that into the ulu story. I guess I've gotten kind of desensitized doing the show or something. Then he told this story, and my jaw was on the ground for basically the entire thing. Then it took him months to clear it to actually tell it to me. So I have literally spent years and years bringing you this story. So it is with great pride that I introduce Shaun McGee. We're going to do an interview here together because there was so much going on in this story. He's going to tell a story we call First Contacts. All right, got me on the lapel, great. So first off, tell me real quick, why did it take me like literally 4 years to get this story out of you?
There's a couple reasons. One is that you don't end up talking about these kinds of things in public too often. And then, of course, there are legal requirements associated with some of these things as well. The district attorney is going to have all kinds of heartache if I talk about something that I'm not supposed to be discussing in public. So
it's legal reasons why you brushed me off for 4 years.
Yes.
If only my wife had that excuse. So get us started. When did this particular story happen?
For me, things kind of start roughly winter of 2009. What had happened initially was that there was a state trooper who had tried to pull a motorist over, and the motorist fled initially in the vehicle, and then there was a short chase that took place, and then the chase ended at some point. The motorist jumps out on foot and takes off running, and the trooper tried to catch the individual, but he was unable to catch him. So he decided at this point it's just wise and prudent to impound the vehicle, have the vehicle brought back to the state troopers, and put in the impound yard, which is in the back side of the trooper facility.
Okay. And did the guy come for his car?
No, and that's kind of odd.
It's normally people come pretty quick, don't they?
I know I would.
So it sat there for a while?
Yeah, the car sat there the entirety of the winter, and kind of just like this time of year where we've got that the warmer temperatures during the day. There was a more seasoned trooper investigator leaving work for the night, and he finishes up his shift, and he happens to walk out in the area near the impound yard. And as he does that, he picks up the odor of decomposition.
Yeah.
So he goes back into the troopers, and he pulls aside one of the Fish and Wildlife officers and says, "Come with me." They go out to the impound yard, and he says, "Somewhere in this impound yard right now is a fish and game violation."
Right. So how do they find it?
They follow their nose, and they end up at the trunk of the car that had been involved in the chase earlier in the winter.
Okay.
So they end up popping the trunk, and
Let me just pause you here.
Sure.
If there's any sensitive listeners, now would be a good time to cover your ears. I'll let you know when we can join us again. So they pop the trunk.
They pop the trunk, and unfortunately, and there's no real easy way to describe this, they find in the trunk of the vehicle a human head, and they find several jars with what look to be tattoos in the jars.
On skin.
On skin.
Right.
Fairbanks,
This is
Alaska.
Pegger Road, just in case you're wondering, between airport and Mitchell or whatever's on the south side. Had any of you heard of this? Okay, some of you heard of this. All right, so I'm guessing at this point there's renewed interest in who belongs to this, or who this vehicle belongs to.
Just became very important.
Okay, so what's the next process for them?
So with that, they renew their interest in trying to identify who the motorist might have been. They begin to develop the story. The story regarding the items in the trunk was very straightforward, very simple. The individual involved in this apparently had been involved in the sale of narcotics, and that he would use the head. It came from one of his competitors at one time. And so he would, if he got the sense that you were in competition with him, he would show this to his competition and say, this will happen to you if you continue to sell in this area, you need to leave, kind of thing. It was his marketing campaign.
So it's like the world's most effective PowerPoint presentation.
You would think.
All right, so you know this because you had an informant that you lined up
So
with him, right?
at some point, yeah, and yeah, I'm not involved in the actual investigation of this event. This was handled by the Alaska State Troopers. They ultimately do develop a confidential informant, someone who knew who this individual was and who was willing to speak with that person. And then there was all kinds of additional effort that goes into that, where they have a monitoring, a wire of sorts, and so that they can listen in on what's being said as the two individuals have a discussion.
All right, so you got the informant, you got this guy, and you have a plan, right? What was the plan for how you're going to bring this guy in?
Right. So, and this takes almost an entire year
Right,
for
so
this
it's
whole
winter
thing.
again, right?
It is. It's now winter again the following year, and that's when they call us in, and I was a member of the Alaska State Troopers CERT unit. CERT is just a kinder, gentler name for SWAT.
A little minty flavor.
Right? And it was a phenomenal team of individuals that I was a part of, and they brief us on everything up to this point, and then that's when the team leader turns to me and says, "Okay, Shaun, come up with your plan. How are you going to take this individual into custody?"
Right.
And so I grab the folks that I'm with, and we do just that. It's one of those things where it's a group decision. There's a leader at some point, but I'm taking input at this point, at this time, from everybody on the team, minus one person. That one person, he was in court at the time, and the judge is not going to take kindly to the fact that he would leave court early. So we understood that he was responsible for handling that before he could ever come and participate with us. The unfortunate part of that, though, is that there is something of an unwritten rule in this kind of an operation, where if you aren't a part of the briefing, if you can't be a part of that initial briefing, you're not supposed to be participating ultimately in the operation, for reasons that will, I guess, become apparent here shortly.
But he gets a pass because he's been involved in all this.
He did, and I mean, it's a legitimate excuse. He's got court. We understand that.
Yep.
It's not like a judge is going to listen to me when I say I really need him, that kind of thing.
So all you have to do is just tell him everything you told everybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the day comes, right? What exactly was the plan that you all came up with?
Sure. So the plan is that we had a gas station, and that there was an open lot in the back of the gas station. The confidential informant and the individual involved were going to park in the backside of the gas station, in about the middle of the gas station. My team and I were going to drive up in something that looks a bit like a soccer mom van. We were going to park there.
Now we say soccer person, Shaun.
Soccer person, I'm sorry.
Yeah. We're inclusive here.
We pull up in the soccer person van. And the driver of the van, who was not a part of our team, hops out, puts the gas pump in the vehicle, and makes it look as though we're getting gas. And there's the 6 of us in the back of the van just waiting at this point to hear from command that they've got enough information and that we can take the individual into custody.
Okay, so you're in front of the gas station. The idea was the suspect, we'll say, is going to be parked behind the gas station in the middle of the back area in a pickup truck.
Right.
Your team is are you going to split?
We are going to split. There's going to
Yeah.
be 2 of us going to the right and 4 of us are going to go to the left side of the facility.
Yeah, and with the green light, you all are going to converge on him from both sides.
This is it.
Right?
Right.
And then who else was involved at this point?
We had a perimeter.
Okay.
So my element is responsible for contact, and then in addition to my element, you also have officers positioned all around the site.
Yep.
And in addition to that, we also had a police canine on scene. The directive at this point for us was, whatever you do, if for some reason the individual that we're trying to take into custody were to get out of the vehicle and take off running, do not chase him. And so that sounds like such a simple thing. And I finally pulled the canine handler aside and I said, what do you mean don't chase him? And he says, well, think about it this way. He says, the police canine focuses on aggression. And he says, and if you're the guy chasing somebody, you just became the most aggressive person on site. And then think about how you're dressed. You're dressed in this big, bulky vest. You got a big helmet on, all of the pads on your elbows.
I know
and
it's a
your
little
knees.
hard to imagine with this, but I'm sure you can do it.
I have nothing for that.
I think that's worse, Shaun, actually.
So whatever you do, if you chase him, the dog is going to look at you and he's going to think that you're dressed in the bite suit. And a bite suit is what the dog practices on its behavior on. So for those 2 reasons, and for my very healthy fear of the police working dog, there was no way that I was chasing the guy if somehow he were to get away.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about.
Outlandish.
Because 6 guys collapsing on him.
6 guys.
Somehow he gets through 4 guys and you, makes it away, and he gets past the dog, and you have a perimeter. This is open and shut.
Right, we're
Right.
done.
Okay, so
What could go wrong?
well, you're here. So
That's a theme I'm picking up on as I sat in the audience.
so what then actually did happen?
So things go well right up until the part where we put the gas pump in the soccer person van, and command calls us on the radio and says, move into your final positions. And so myself and one of my teammates take up our position on the right side of the building as you face it. 4 of my other teammates take up position on the left side of the building. And then just before we were to round the corner, we hold and we wait for command to say, go. And that word comes through rather quickly once we're in position. And that's where things start to fall apart. Hey, it's all right. You just ran over to the side of the building. So I get to the side of the building. I pause for a moment. Word comes across the radio, and my earpiece is go. And I turn the corner, and no sooner do I turn that corner, I run into the pickup truck with the confidential informant. I physically hit the truck because it is parked nowhere near the middle of the building at this point. It is parked right at the corner. Just far enough over so I couldn't see it when I was in my last position of concealment, but then there it was. And so I hit it, bounce off of it real quick, take up, I sidestep just a couple feet to my left, and I'm where I need to be. And my entire world at this point is that individual sitting in the passenger seat. I see his face, I see his eyes as he sits there, and I don't really deviate my view at this point. I'm looking right at him. I'm yelling commands to him. Don't move, those kinds of things. Let me see your hands, as I'm saying to him. I never saw my teammate throw the flashbang. A flashbang is it's a metal device. It's roughly the power of a half stick of dynamite. It's supposed to just make a loud noise and a bright flash. It disorients people for a brief, a second and a half window of time, and it gives us the ability to do what we need to do at that point to take somebody into custody. It buys me just a fraction of time, but it's just enough time. That flashbang was thrown into the bed of the truck, and I never saw, again because of my focus, I never saw the rim and the tire that was in the back of the truck launched 50 feet up into the air over my head, the heads of the individuals in the cab of the truck, my teammate. Never saw any of that. From what I understand, and this will be a common theme here too, from what I understand from the perimeter, it was quite comical to watch.
Okay, but wait, it's all going to be fine because there's 4 more guys coming around the other side.
Here they come.
They'll clean it up, right?
And that's the problem. Again, watching the individual now, I'm getting a sense that there's a gap. There is no 4 people off to my left-hand side. And at some point, I've got to look a little bit further off just to see where they are. And what I see is 4 big, burly SWAT guys slipping on the ice and falling down, all 4 of them simultaneously. Go back to that heavy vest that we're all wearing at this point. We're like big weeble wobbles. They fall, the top half of the body's heavier than the bottom half, and they're down for a little while. They can get back to their feet. Now, again, I'm trying to watch him, but I'm looking at them, and as they get right back to their feet, all 4 of them fall back down a second time.
Oh, no. All right. I'm starting to get how he got away here a little bit, but... All right, so at that point, those guys are pretty much down. You're on the wrong side of the car. He hops out.
And he does.
Point, right?
He's got his gap. He sees his opportunity, and he moves for it. And he's quickly out of the truck, and he takes off running right away from me towards a fence off in the distance.
Right. Who chases him?
Let's go back to that one individual who missed the briefing. I covered all of the appropriate information with that individual except for one part. I failed to mention the fact that the dog was there. And that particular trooper is what we would call a gazelle. He is as fast as they come when it comes to running. I'm not a runner. Unless you're chasing me, I'm not a runner. And he's on his feet. And he is taking off right after the subject as he's running towards the fence line. The canine handler who's present described it to me like this. He said he has straddled the dog, which is what they commonly do. He's got his hands on the collar of the dog, and he's trying to get the dog's head to look at the guy running away, the subject that we were trying to take into custody. But the dog's head keeps switching back to my friend who is running behind the guy. The canine handler, to his credit, knows that if he lets go of the canine is going to nuke the trooper. There's no other way about it.
Yeah.
The 3 other guys who were on the ice, they're now on their feet. And even though they know better, they're all chasing the trooper. So all 4 of them now are running. The canine can't be let go. The canine handler picks up. I'm sure I know exactly what was going on in his head at that moment, knowing him. He's furious. He picks up the dog. He starts to walk towards the patrol car to put the dog back away. The dog is so frustrated right now because it really wanted to go and get somebody. So the dog does this thing with its head somehow where the head just comes all the way over and the dog begins biting up and down the handler's arm. The handler, to his credit, takes all of the hits from the dog, extremely painful, still walks the dog over, puts the dog into the patrol car, and that's that aspect of the event. A pickup truck pulls into the parking lot where I'm still standing there, not moving again. I make eye contact with the driver of the vehicle. He says, "What happened?" I said, "He's on his way to the fence." He says, "I'm going to drive down the street and see if I can't get ahead of him." I said, "I'm with you." And I run over and I jump into the back of his pickup truck. There's 2 police officers in the cab of the truck and me now in the back of this pickup truck. And we take off down Van Horn Road in an effort to get ahead of where we think this guy is going to be running, and then cut in to try and cut him off and get him. We're driving rather fast down Van Horn Road at this point. Now we've cut in, we're slowing down a little bit. We're still moving kind of quickly, I guess maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20 miles an hour. And I feel us slowing down, and so for me, being in the back of the truck, what I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to try and start to stand up so I can see what is going on. The time with me in the back of the truck, that earpiece that I had has fallen out. And what's being discussed on the radio is that when the subject was in the pickup truck and they were talking earlier, he had said how he had a gun, how he was never going to go back to jail, that he'd shoot somebody, stop them from getting to jail. So word is going out over the radio. Be careful, don't get too close to him. We have reason to believe he's armed, all of those kinds of things. I don't hear any of that. I'm just coming up, I'm almost to a full standing position as I'm looking, and as I glance off to my right, I can see him. I see him hiding underneath a semi-tractor trailer. And no sooner do I see him there, maybe 30 yards away or so, the driver of the vehicle, my good friend,
Who shall not be named,
sees him at the same time. And he slams on the brakes. I'm launched directly over the cab of the truck. As I go past the windshield, the passenger in the truck, another good friend of mine, looks at the driver and says, "Do you see that?" He says, "That's that SWAT shit." He says, he knows he's got that gun. And he jumps out of the truck after him. He's giving me far too much credit. All I know is that I've flown through the air, I've hit the ground, I've tumbled a number of times, and perhaps because of the way I'm dressed with all the stuff on and everything, when I stop rolling, I am on my feet, and I'm closer to the bad guy than ever before. I start running after him. He starts running away from me. And it's one of these conversations where I'm saying, "Stop running," and I'll catch you. I'll do this. Anything I can say at this point to get him to stop running. I'm not being a runner. I don't have much gas in my tank at this point. I've got adrenaline, but that's about it. And I can feel that I'm closing on him. I'm getting closer. I do see, I'm losing sight of one hand for a little bit, but that wasn't a huge thought for me at the time. Again, not knowing about that earlier discussion about the gun, maybe that would have changed what I did. I don't know. All I knew is that I was getting closer and closer, and there was yet another one of these cedar fences that we were getting closer to. The guy that was running seemed to be getting tired, and he hops up on that cedar fence, and he kind of pauses for just a moment, and that's enough time for me to have closed the distance with him. And I hit him, and I basically drive him through that fence at that point. The fence comes down. My buddy is running on the inside of the fence. He says it's the most amazing thing he's ever seen. He's running, and then here comes the fence, and here comes the guy, and here's me on top of the guy. And everybody jumps on then. And that was a good thing, because with all that weight on him, he wasn't able to get to the gun. They roll us off one at a time, keep control of his hands, and then somebody reaches inside of his jacket and they pull out the gun. The gun was a Casull, a 454 Casull, one of the biggest handguns I've ever seen in my life. And I'm pretty sure if he would have pointed that at me at some point during this entire exchange, it would have been bad for me.
So what were the things that you learned from this, Shaun?
Where to start?
Is this why you're in academia now, just out of curiosity?
No more police work for me, right? For me, those unwritten rules that are in our world, they're there for a reason. My violating that one rule of don't have somebody participate in the operation if they're not at the briefing, that was critical for me. In fact, this story is easy for me to tell. Not that it's easy to be on a stage telling it, but normally this is something that I would have talked about with new troopers who are looking to get on the team. The idea was, learn from my mistakes, please don't reinvent them yourself, kind of thing. So that was critical for me. And I think the other thing I walked away from this event with is this idea, the folks from the military understand this idea that, no plan stays the same after first contact in the field, kind of thing. And that was very much the case for me. We may have had a plan A and even a plan B, but I think by the time we finished this particular operation, we were on the E and F plans.
There's definitely some F in there, I'll give you that.
Yes.
So. Shaun, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Shaun McGee. I'll take that mic from you. Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks. Whew. We have a lot of people to thank tonight. I want to thank Sarah Smith for all of this. It may not be SWAT gear, but works for me. The photograph for our poster and program tonight was by Sasha Leos, who's over here, I hope. Tim Palmer recorded the intro for iHeartRadio. Office Max gave us that desk. We appreciate that. And Papa John's donated some pizza, so we're thankful to them. We're thankful to Lauren Neufeld and KUAC for airing Dark Winter Nights in the TV shows. Please subscribe to our podcast and share it with friends so we can share the real Alaska with the world. John Huff and Charmin did our lighting and sound tonight from AUP. Thank you guys. You are the magic makers. And all of our volunteers, my family and friends, my students who are getting hefty extra credit, but nonetheless, appreciate it. And event photography by J.R. Anchetta, and stage managing and robot driving by Kat Banner is back there. Now, the real force behind Dark Winter Nights, and the only reason it really continues, are executive producers. Amanda, Huff, Ryan, Flyin, Peterson, Robin, Can't Hurt to Ask, Robin, she has no last name, Chris, Wannabe Island Zwolinski, and our story producers, Brittany, There's a Drug for That, Carnes, and Katie Aprilat. And the UAF Communication and Journalism Department, where I serve as professor, supported this idea from the very start. So I want to especially thank them, and Brian O'Donohue, who gave us a thumbs up for the first show. Finally, as is tradition in the show, I'd like to thank my wife. She let me buy a DeLorean. She didn't exactly push me to buy a DeLorean, but she let me buy a DeLorean, and for that I am eternally grateful. Thank you, Melissa, for holding my hand so tightly through this crazy journey. Finally, I'd like to thank our storytellers tonight: Amanda Byrd, Atileo Frazerra, David Best, Ron Boynton, Mercia, Dr. Jessie Robertson, Mike Spindler, and Shaun McGee. My name is Rob Prince. Remember, these are the stories we tell up here in Alaska on Dark Winter Nights. Good night. Nice job. Nice job. Good job, man. Excellent. Good work. Nice work. Good job, man. All right, let's go. Shaun, that was the let's leave. Come on. Yep. Nice job. How's it feel? It's done. All right.